Bear with me, folks. Bear with me. Bear.
Welcome to Let Me Out Productions in the top brass down. I'm here with Iron Q.
What it do?
You see him over there? I'm going to put this back delicately now. Okay. Alright. Back on frame. Look at that. And let me make sure that I have the live chat, the appropriate live chat in the browser. Today we're going to, as it says in the description, talk about co-publishing the economy with this bot podcast that I made, since we can't get any journalists to do their job. Alright, so chat, sure. Not you, chat, but I'm talking about I need to put the chat on screen, and that's what we're doing right now. I guess I'll do a sound check. Infinite window sound check. Nothing to see here. We're popped out. The appropriate live chat in the browser. Okay, we're good. Okay, everybody, look at that. Okay. We can't have any music on in the background, otherwise we'll pick up the live. It'll get copyright strike. And it'll what does it do, YouTubers? Diminishes your views or something like that? Okay, let's dive into it. I'm just gonna dive right into what we're gonna cover today. Let Me Out Productions is an intellectual property publishing collective founded by myself and all of the people who are publishing the brand. It operates on an innovative impact puzzle tokenomic structure, leveraging non-fungible tokens to define and distribute fractional ownership, collaborative rights, and access to services and experiences within its ecosystem. The core philosophy centers on collective development and valuing labor input in intellectual property creation, drawing parallels to libertarian and socialist ideas of decentralized authority and direct participation. Let Me Out distinguishes between ownership of the overarching franchise and distributed assets, offering different tokenized ownership models for each. The franchise can also cover the brand, and distributed assets means any product, service, distributed asset, set of logistics, experience, anything that has a name that you are pouring your time, your liability, your expertise into, that is intellectual property. Doesn't matter what you're doing. Your time, your liability, your expertise could be cleaning the trash cans in the office at the end of every day. You're still publishing that intellectual property. So here, we use the impact puzzle, where intellectual property is treated as a kit of Lego-style pieces rather than a single unit. Each piece represents a set of right processes and stated goal results, referred to as impact with a capital I. This translates that impact into a material titled property as a modular transactable good. The entire structure is designed to be open source, to allowing other platforms to implement similar structures in how you are organizing, and developing intellectual property. The thought behind that, of course, is if we are all organizing our intellectual property with a set of publishers' titles, then we can form a market for the publisher titles that we're selling for open development and contribution to these things. So the rest of it, I'm going to let the podcast host cover, because that's what we're here for. We're here for Bear Eat Ape. No shade to our friends, the Bored Ape Yacht Club. They're not quite like friends, but they're friendly. So I've got no issue with them, and I'm sure they don't have any issue with me. But we're all co-publishers on the Public Notary.
Curious Minds to the Deep Dive. Welcome, Curious Minds, to the Deep Dive. I'm Sloopy Miko.
And I'm Sweet Blackberry.
Together, we're your guides on Bear Eats Ape, where we really get into the weeds of the intellectual property publishing markets.
And today, we're tackling something pretty fundamental, a concept that could, maybe reshape how value is created, shared, even how it compounds across the whole economy.
We're talking about the intellectual property publishing market itself. I mean, it's this huge arena, isn't it? It contains basically all labor.
Yeah, all the time invested, the liability people take on, the expertise they bring. It all contributes against the rights and processes needed to, make ideas real.
Think about it, though. You have these incredible ideas, amazing creative work, maybe groundbreaking research.
Yeah.
They generate so much value.
Absolutely huge value.
But how often do the people who actually create that value, the laborers, the innovators, how often do they really get their fair share?
Not often enough.
And maybe even more crucially, how often does their contribution get compounding value? Value that grows over time instead of just a flat fee or a paycheck.
Right. That's a really key point. It feels like a systemic issue, and it's something this deep dive is definitely going to look closer at.
Yeah, we think this relationship with intellectual property, it really should grant compounding value to every single contribution. It shouldn't matter how big or small it seems at first.
Agreed. It's about making sure every kind of piece of the puzzle, every bit of effort builds on itself and gets recognized properly.
Exactly. So what if? What if there was a way to make sure every contribution, every Lego piece of labor and expertise got its rightful compounding value in this IP market?
Well, that's the big question, isn't it? And that's what leads us to today's topic.
Right. We're talking about impact puzzles, which sounds intriguing, maybe a bit complex, but it's described as a, revolutionary method for co-publishing the economy.
Yeah, using decentralized public ledgers.
Yeah.
The kind that record transactions in blocks and keep them in a chain. Blockchain tech, basically.
So our mission today, for you listening, is to give you a genuine shortcut, a way to get truly informed on this, frankly, groundbreaking approach. We're hoping for some aha moments, maybe some surprising facts.
Is that all the usual jargon and information overload, hopefully?
Yeah, fingers
Thank you,
crossed.
BlackBerry.
And this whole methodology, these impact puzzles, they were developed by Kimani Okearah.
That's right, a cognitive linguist and a media producer.
Let's pause there real quick. I don't want too much credit. I've been doing this for 20 years in terms of media production, meaning structuring containers into results. So I sit there, I take the idea, I take the concept, and I build the structure to put all of that labor into the concept to produce the result. And I've been doing that a long time. Haven't seen too much compound value for that myself. Now, on top of that, I'm in the academic world. I am a cognitive linguist, which means I research the creation and delivery of meaning. And that's what language is. It's a tool of behavior that we use to create and deliver meaning. Here, I'm not I'm not speaking. That's the easy way to think about it. I am performing a series of noises through a hole in my face, and you're able to understand the meaning I'm intending to deliver because of two survival traits that synthesize what we call meaning, and that is pattern interpretation, one survival trait, and empathy, that's the second. So empathy and pattern interpretation combine to allow this hive mind flow of meaning to work in speech and in text. So here these are tiny symbols that work in sequence to create this meaning, and we all agree that the meaning is what it says. And same thing with speech. I just saved y'all hours and hours and hours of lecture. Okay, so I don't want too much credit because in this behavior, in every language and every sort of linguistic innovation, it does take a community to behave that way to innovate that behavior. So here we're using non-fungible tokens as publishing titles against our time, our liability, and our expertise that we're depositing into that result. And that time, that liability, and expertise, that can be your everything as a founder. It can be something that you're hired to do, graphic design, I don't know, whatever people... I wasn't prepared to talk about a bunch of different job titles, but and it can also be like, the folks that we in the film industry call them below the line. I don't like that term. It makes it into the sort of class hierarchy. But the grunt labor, they call it unskilled labor, and I say it is skilled because you have to be able to show up and apply time to that, and that takes skill. It does. Have you ever tried scraping a dumpster? Yeah. Not me. So, back to the podcast, back to Floopy Miko supposed to be the lady, and Floopy Miko's the man, and Sweet Blackberry's supposed to be the lady. The hosts got their names backwards. I'm just clarifying that for future podcast episodes of Bear Eat Ape.
Someone who's clearly spent years really thinking about how we create and exchange value, seeing the flaws, and trying to build something better.
Okay, so here's the plan. We'll start by digging into Okearah's ideas on how we as humans actually create meaning and value, like the behavioral side of things.
Which sounds maybe a bit abstract, but it's super foundational.
Totally. Then we'll look at the problems, the deep issues in traditional systems that kind of stop that fair value distribution from happening.
Yeah, the roadblocks.
And then finally, we'll unpack impact puzzles as this, well, exciting solution. We've got real world examples too from the Let Me Out Productions brand.
Including things
somewhere
like
over there.
Musical Bears, It Let Me Out, Crypto Bears Musical, which sounds amazing, and Press
You can
Pass.
get in here.
These are actual containers for this co-publishing idea.
And we'll even connect it all back to the, surprisingly deep philosophical roots behind this whole framework. Sound good?
Sounds like a plan. Let's dive in.
Okay, so to really get our heads around impact puzzles, we need to start where Kimani Okearah starts, with this fundamental idea about how we humans create meaning and value. It might feel a little academic at first, maybe?
Yeah, maybe a bit, but stick with us, because this behavioral lens, it's absolutely key to understanding how value forms and flows, or, maybe more importantly, how it often gets blocked or diverted unfairly.
Right. So Okearah suggests that humans perceive language not just as words, but by interpreting patterns to create meaning that we all kind of agree on, that we share.
And what's really cool here is how this idea of language goes way beyond just speech or writing. It's about interpreting any pattern. Could be visual, could be sounds, could even be how people behave.
Okay.
And we use those patterns to build a shared understanding. And that shared understanding, that directly feeds into how we decide what something is worth, how we perceive its value.
So the act of creating and delivering value, it's fundamentally linguistic, like based on shared interpretation of patterns.
Exactly. As a
Right.
core human behavior, it is. And in this view, value itself is presented as kind of flat. It just is. It exists.
Yeah.
There's the moment it's created, and then there's the moment someone experiences it. The real challenge, Okearah argues, isn't whether value exists. It's how we, handle the exchange, how we recognize it between ourselves.
Okay, so think of it like a great piece of music. The music itself, the pattern of notes, it just is valuable. It exists. The problem isn't its inherent worth. It's how we decide who gets the money when it's played or who owns the rights, and does the songwriter actually benefit long term? That kind of thing.
Precisely that. It's about the systems we build around the value. Which leads us to the next bit, which is really compelling. Okearah identifies what actively messes this up, what disrupts this sort of honest linguistic flow of value.
And he calls it sanctimony. What does that mean here? How does that throw a wrench in the works?
Right, sanctimony. In this behavioral theory, it's a major disruptor, a big one. And it's not just some vague idea. He suggests it kicks off this whole destructive cascade, a pattern you can probably recognize in, lots of places.
Okay, lay it out for us.
The first layer is what he calls self-righteous prescriptivism, SRP.
Catchy.
Yeah. It's described as leverage-seeking behavior. Basically, it's when a person, or maybe a group, gets really self-righteous, maybe moralistic, definitely absolutist. And they use that stance to prescribe what things mean or what others are worth. They genuinely seem to believe they have to control other people to control reality itself.
Wow. Okay.
And this often involves finding and then deliberately weaponizing some kind of performance standard. Could be anything, really.
Like setting a completely arbitrary rule.
Could be. And once they've weaponized that standard, they actively look for other people, other parties, to enforce it, right? To sort of lock in their control and their version of reality. The source compares it to tasty syrup to slurp up, suggesting there's this deceptive appeal to seeking control this way.
So someone sets a rule, claims it's for the greater good or quality or whatever.
Yeah.
But really, it's just about gaining leverage.
Yeah.
About controlling others.
That's the argument.
Yeah.
And that leads right into the second layer, esoteric fraud culture, EFC.
Okay.
So when that self-righteous prescriptivism, that SRP, is practiced really loudly and consistently, maybe by a leader or a core group, it very often creates this ESD around it.
Esoteric, meaning hidden, internal.
Exactly. And esoteric meaning is internal, it's shared only within a specific group, and often it's deliberately kept obscure from outsiders. The fraud part is the falseness of that internal meaning. It's a manufactured reality, basically. And the culture is the group that buys into it and enforces it.
So the EFC, the culture, reinforces the weaponized standards from the SRP people.
That's it. It becomes this self-perpetuating echo chamber, all about control, manipulating value based on these internally defined, often fraudulent standards.
And where does this whole cycle end up? What's the result?
Ultimately, this corrosive cycle leads to what Okearah calls performative sanctimony, which then spirals into emotional blackmail. Yeah. The core issue, as he sees it, is this really deep-seated human tendency to want to feel better than the next person. This kind of constant competition for who's morally superior or smarter or whatever.
Right. You see that everywhere.
Totally. And it makes sharing meaning or value incredibly inefficient. It doesn't build things up. It creates these authority structures where groups basically compete to throw poop at the thing the group forms self-righteousness against.
Okay, vivid image.
It is, right. But it makes the point. It devolves into this destructive game of tearing others down to feel superior instead of collaborating. And it forces you to ask, do we really need to be constantly seeking leverage over every little thing?
Probably not.
Is that actually a productive way to live together and create value? Okearah's theory strongly suggests that this constant leverage seeking, using these weaponized standards, is just fundamentally inefficient and damaging to actually sharing value.
Okay, so if that's the problem, this deep, almost ingrained pattern of sanctimony and leverage seeking messing up the flow of value, how do impact puzzles offer a way out? How does this system really change the game for intellectual property?
Well, it's a fundamental shift, really. Instead of thinking about IP as a single, solid thing, usually owned by one person or one company,
Right.
the core idea here is that the IP product is a puzzle in its actual tangible existence. You're encouraged to think of your idea, your creation, not as one finished thing, but as a kit of Lego-style pieces you're designing.
Okay, a kit of Legos. I like that. So each piece is
Right.
this.
Each Lego-style piece is defined as impact. And impact itself isn't just a vague word. It's defined as a specific set of rights, processes, and stated goals or results tied to that piece.
Gotcha. And who gets to make these impact pieces? Is it just the original creator?
No, and that's the key part. The impact developer, which could be the initial creator, sure, but could also be a team member, a collaborator, even a whole platform contributing something. They can earn these pieces individually, or they can contribute to the bigger picture, the wider property.
Okay.
And this whole process, earning these pieces, is the fundamental accounting behavior. It's the mechanism that lets everyone share in the properties we're building together. And crucially, it ensures that all those contributions, all those Lego pieces, accrue compound value over time.
So it's recognizing that we're all adding these Legos to IP kits all the time.
Yeah, every day.
And the system just makes it transparent, tracks it, and rewards it.
Exactly. That's the heart of an impact puzzle. Or, as we should probably keep reminding ourselves and the listener, it's also called a scalable impact puzzle, or a SIP for co-publishing the economy. It's about scalable shared ownership based on verifiable contribution.
Okay, SIP, I get it. But how do you actually track all these pieces, these individual impacts, these complex relationships? Sounds like a nightmare to manage in a big project.
Right, you'd think so. But that's where the technology comes in. The system uses what's described as a public notary service. Think of it as a decentralized public ledger, essentially, blockchain technology.
Okay, the blockchain again.
Yeah. And its job is to authenticate all these simultaneous user transactions, people earning or trading their impact pieces. These transactions aren't just thrown onto the ledger randomly. They get organized, grouped together into blocks. And once a block is verified, it's added to this unbreakable, encrypted, permanent chain.
The blockchain.
The blockchain. And that chain becomes the permanent, unalterable record. It shows how all the contributions, all the impact pieces are securely recorded and lack back to the overall property, the puzzle they're part of. It gives you transparency, accountability.
And you can't argue with it later. It's locked in.
Exactly. It provides that really solid foundation needed for this kind of complex collaborative ownership model to actually work.
It really is a fascinating concept, deeply thought out. And it all comes from Kimani Okearah. Tell us a bit more about him. His background seems crucial to understanding why he developed this. It feels like it came from real-world experience.
Oh, absolutely. So Kimani Okearah founded Let Me Out Productions LMO way back in 2007.
Good.
It started as a film and TV production house, and the source says it was explicitly born from friendship, community, and sustainability. So those values were there from the start.
Yeah.
In the early years, say 2007 to 2012, LMO was making short films, documentaries. But Okearah wasn't just making movies. He was actively studying the industry on both coasts, apparently,
Yeah.
really trying to figure out how to build platform independence, how to make things sustainable. He was already looking for a better way.
So dissecting the existing system to build something new, not just fit in.
Seems like it. Then, from about 2012 to 2021, LMO shifted gears a bit. It operated more like a digital media service boutique, supporting larger production houses, doing videos, graphic design, websites, mostly for businesses in Northern California.
Okay, so getting hands-on experience with the day-to-day grind and probably the frustrations of the industry.
Exactly.
Jesus.
That period must have given him this incredibly intimate ground level view of how the industry works or doesn't work. The
Yes.
inefficiencies, the inequities, the pain points.
Makes sense. And then 2021 was the big shift.
Yeah, early 2021. Okearah committed full-time to LMO with this really ambitious goal to embed his lifelong vision of creator equity right into the film and TV industry. And not just temporarily, but in perpetuity.
Wow. That's a big goal.
Huge. And his background is pretty extensive. We're talking over 15 years in various production roles. Places like the Young Turks, Discovery, Showtime, ABC. Big names.
So he's seen it from the inside at multiple levels.
Definitely. And apparently during that time, he wasn't just doing the job. He was meticulously studying the whole system, always with an eye toward improving it for everyone, taking a real macro view. He led teams in content production, audience experience, worked closely with leaders in tech, distribution, content production, always focused on quality, authenticity, making sure the consumer, the audience, was satisfied and the team's work was valued.
So that deep systemic understanding built up over years from the ground up, that's what led him to architect the impact puzzle, the SIP framework.
That's the story. It wasn't just an academic exercise. It came from decades of seeing the problems firsthand and methodically designing a solution.
Thank you for the praise. Jeez. Get off my glizzy for a second, Floopy Miko. Wow. Okay. They're just on me. My goodness. I did not prompt that. I did not be like, shower me in praise. I'm just like, talk about this specific. They just really like, they just really like me, I guess. Yeah, here you guys go. You know, right out here on the website, you can go to letmeout.productions or beacons.ai/letmeoutproductions, website.beacons.ai/letmeoutproductions. You can look at the notable works and affiliations. This is probably 4 times as long if I were to put everything on here. But, yeah, those are the ones I'm super proud of. We're super proud of here at LMO. You can see a couple of them down here. Look how slick this website looks. Ooh-wee, ooh-wee. Oh, look at the lost bear. Look at look, she lost. Look, she lost. She's out there lost. Okay, let's get back to the pod. Woo! Thank you for the glizzy glaze, Floopy Miko. You weird man. I've structured intellectual property and results at the highest level, honestly, since, as it says here, 2006, 2005. I even consider my 2004 stuff to be part of that build. So, yeah, we're going way back in time. But yeah, check this stuff out, y'all. And as we populate everybody in our collective that is co-publishing, everybody has their own unique, like, Publishers Corner website where they have their specific results, and we encourage everybody to kind of look at it that way. And we're going to network each other in, and we're going to share each other's success, we're going to share each other's results and champion each other. And this is a great resource. I love Beacons. I don't work for them. They can pay me. They can pay us. You know, we're not going to turn down sponsorships, but this is a great software. It's entirely free. I didn't pay a dime to do any of this.
Looks great.
This is one of the best websites I've ever had. We're gonna get back into it because they're gonna end up talking about all of this.
Yeah.
But pretty proud of.
Okay, so you've painted a really compelling picture of impact puzzles as this potential solution. But let's be clear, it's obviously a direct answer to some pretty serious problems in the current IP world, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
It wouldn't exist if the current system was working perfectly for everyone.
So what's the absolute core problem that these impact puzzles, these SIPs, are trying to fix in those traditional models? What's the root issue?
The fundamental problem, as Kimani Okearah defines it, is something he calls leveraged violence.
Leveraged violence. Okay, that sounds intense. Break that down.
Let's look at the traditional model. Typically, you have the creator, the person with the idea. They provide the language, right? The concept, the blueprint.
Got it.
Then you have the team that's hired to actually make it happen. They provide the labor.
Makes sense.
And then you usually have the customer, or more accurately, the financial backer. They provide the resources, the money, usually.
The investor.
Right. The investor. And here's the critical flaw. In that traditional setup, the investor often ends up owning most, if not basically all, of the property itself, the actual IP.
Okay.
And that ownership structure, that gives the investor leveraged violence. It's this disproportionate, often coercive power over the time, the liability, the skills that the creator and the laborers brought to the table.
So their contribution, the idea and the work, gets undervalued.
Massively.
Yeah.
In this traditional view, the value of the language, the idea, and the labor, the effort, is treated as flat. Like it gets paid once, maybe, but it doesn't grow, it doesn't compound.
Okay.
Meanwhile, the property, the thing the investor owns, that becomes the only thing that holds compound value.
Yeah.
That's where all the significant gains accumulate over time.
So yeah, it really is like those dynamics you see on shows like Shark Tank. The investors come in, put up money, and they want a huge chunk of the ownership and control, often way out of proportion to the creator's initial vision and work.
Exactly. The source explicitly uses that Shark Tank analogy. And it stresses this isn't about pointing fingers at individual investors being evil.
Right.
It's the system. It's the system. The entities, the companies in the traditional market are often designed specifically to attract investors who are looking for those kinds of gains. The structure itself incentivizes concentrating value in the property and the entity, not distributing it fairly to everyone who contributed.
Yeah.
It becomes almost baked into the process.
And this leveraged violence, this whole approach, it leads to more predictable, right? You mentioned a cycle.
Yeah, predictable and often pretty destructive cycle, especially within traditional publishing and media. So initially, the gains for the investors come from market success, right? The thing takes off.
Sure.
But once that success peaks, maybe growth slows down. The focus inevitably shifts.
Yeah.
First, squeeze the labor.
Meaning cut costs, layoffs.
Trimming the workforce, reducing budgets, extracting as much output for as little input as possible from the people doing the work. Then, after labor's been squeezed, and maybe the initial quality push has done its job, the next thing to go is quality itself. Corners get cut to maintain profits or hit investor targets.
Right, you see that happen.
And once you've squeezed success, labor, and quality for the maximum possible return for the investor, the properties often just kind of die. They become unprofitable, irrelevant, unsustainable.
And sometimes the company does too.
Often the entity follows, yeah. Or it just moves on to the next vertical, the next IP, to run through the same cycle.
Wow, so the property itself becomes this corrupted vessel in that cycle.
That's the language used, yeah. Because it's been manipulated to serve just one part of the value chain, the investor. And the argument is that many platforms today are maybe unintentionally or maybe not.
Can I just point out that these two podcast hosts, I am not sophisticated enough to discuss my own work like this. So this is phenomenal. This is like, my work is, it's definitely, it's definitely sophisticated work, but I myself am like a hillbilly from the hills. So the way I talk is like a California hillbilly, and a little bit of like, Sacramento hood swing, that kind of thing to it. So hearing this like presented in this like high level, sophisticated, like it's like, this is pretty great. It's pretty great. Now that they're off the glizzy of me personally, I don't like that stuff. I honestly hate that stuff. But they're talking about the work, and they're talking about the actual merit of the idea. And so what they just broke down is exactly how I put it to paper, but hearing it out loud is phenomenal. And everybody in Wall Street who's watching this back, y'all can agree with me because you know that that's true. So, we need to find a solution, and we're here together, linguists, lawyers, and whatever the hell else is out there. And we're going to work on the solution together. We're going to co-publish the solution. Okay? And Q here is a retired Air Force sergeant, and he's a psycholinguist himself, in training. Well, I don't want to I don't want to cut them down. We just have to work on the academic credentials part. But as far as the what a psycholinguist is and does, we're right there.
We're there.
So I'm a cognitive linguist. I study the creation and delivery of meaning. A psycholinguist more so focuses on how language informs behavior and how expressed language it can be interpreted as certain behaviors. Okay, let's get back into it. We're going to let them keep chewing it up. I think they're doing a great job. So shout out to Floopy Miko, the male podcast host, and Sweet Blackberry, the female podcast host. I'm clarifying that for Julian and Katarina specifically.
Grifting their investors. They're selling them on properties built on this extract or sustained long-term value.
Which just makes debt cycles worse.
Exactly. It complicates debt. And that leveraged violence just trickles down, affecting everyone involved from top to bottom. It's systemic value extraction, not equitable value creation.
So if that's the bleak picture, what's the path out? How do we get to a real paradigm shift?
For the investors come from market success, right? The thing takes off.
Sure.
But once that success peaks, maybe growth slows down.
We're
The
gonna
focus
cover this
inevitably
again.
shifts.
Yeah,
First, squeeze the labor.
meaning cut costs, layoffs.
Trimming the workforce, reducing budgets, extracting as much output for as little input as possible from the people doing the work. Then, after labor's been squeezed, and maybe the initial quality push has done its job, the next thing to go is quality itself. Corners get cut to maintain profits or hit investor targets.
Right, you see that happen.
And once you've squeezed success, labor, and quality for the maximum possible return for the investor, the properties often just kind of die. They become unprofitable, irrelevant, unsustainable.
And sometimes the company does too.
Often the entity follows, yeah. Or it just moves on to the next vertical, the next IP, to run through the same cycle.
Wow, so the property itself becomes this corrupted vessel in that cycle.
That's the language used, yeah. Because it's been manipulated to serve just one part of the value chain, the investor. And the argument is that many platforms today are maybe unintentionally or maybe not grifting their investors. They're selling them on properties built on this extractive model, properties that can't actually scale or sustain long-term value.
Which just makes debt cycles worse.
Exactly. It complicates debt. And that leveraged violence just trickles down, affecting everyone involved from top to bottom. It's systemic value extraction, not equitable value creation.
So if that's the bleak picture, what's the path out? How do we get to a real paradigm shift? How do we break free from this leveraged violence loop?
The fundamental step, according to this framework, is you have to separate the entity, the company, the organization, from the property, the actual intellectual creation.
Okay, how does that work?
The source gives a really good example. Mondelez International. It's the big corporation, the entity. It's also a property in itself, the brand.
Right, like Kraft or Nabisco before it kind of.
Yeah. But Oreo, that's just one property that the Mondelez entity manages. It's distinct.
Gotcha.
Now, Mondelez, the entity, obviously has leverage over the time labor puts into making Oreos. That's inherent in employment. But the argument goes, all the contributors, the factory workers, the bakers, the marketers, the logistics people, they all share authority over the quality of the Oreo product itself.
Interesting distinction. Authority over quality.
Yeah. And the logic follows. If you actually accounted for that shared authority over quality, and you combined it with a fair, sustainable distribution of the intellectual property itself,
We'd get better quality.
you'd likely get much higher quality across the board. Because everyone involved would have a real, tangible stake in the product's long-term success and reputation.
Makes intuitive sense.
And when quality goes up, because that shared effort and ownership, market presence gets stronger, inherent value increases. It really calls for this deeply collaborative model of ownership, where, as the framework puts it, everybody owns the property they develop.
Instead of the old model.
Exactly. Instead of the dominant traditional model that centralizes ownership and just perpetuates that leveraged violence. It's about consciously choosing collaboration and shared value over constantly trying to seek leverage over every little thing.
Okay, so if the big problem is leveraged violence, where ownership gets concentrated, typically with the investor, how do impact puzzles, these SIPS, actually offer that collaborative alternative? It sounds like it's more than just sharing profits differently.
Ooh, it's much more fundamental than that.
Yeah.
What's really interesting is that the impact puzzle methodology introduces specific Use cases. Think of them like standardized modules or blueprints that are openly available for others to adopt and build upon.
Openly available, like open source.
Some parts are, yeah. These foundational use cases were laid out in Kimani Okearah's key paper back on March 24th, 2021. Let's break them down.
Please do.
Okay, use case number 1. This involves using non-fungible tokens, NFTs, specifically as puzzle pieces to be owned.
Right, the digital Legos we talked about.
Exactly. And these NFT puzzle pieces facilitate an exclusive impact-based collaboration in intellectual property development. This first use case, explicitly open source. Anyone can use this basic concept.
And the goal is?
The goal is to directly translate collaborative effort into tangible property ownership, both for tracking value and, importantly, for quality assurance for the audience. Using an impact puzzle construct, again, a scalable impact puzzle. SIP for co-publishing the economy defines the whole experience, the story, the potential result as a puzzle. It turns creator labor into this hard-capped pool of equal pieces. It fundamentally reframes how we account for effort.
Okay, that's use case 1, NFTs as ownable puzzle pieces for collaboration. What's next?
Use case number 2. This is the specific strategy, the how-to, of forming a value and quality assured definition of property. You do this with an official deed, like a legal document, that explicitly fractionalizes ownership or other rights over that shared project or asset. And then those fractional parts get assigned directly to the unique token IDs of the NFT puzzle pieces from use case 1. This one is also open source.
So this is setting up the legal and technical plumbing for distributed ownership.
Pretty much. And this specific strategy is branded as SIPP Scalable Intellectual Property.
Did you say legal and technical plumbing? What? Okay, let's just cover that real quick. I want to explain this a little bit because it's new information for some folks. The first use case of using a non-fungible token, aka a digital title, a publishing title, as a puzzle piece to be owned in an exclusive impact-based collaboration in intellectual property development, which can be any brand, product, service, experience, distributed asset, set of logistics, franchise, etc. That's open source, meaning you guys can go do that literally right now, but you don't know what you're doing. Hold on a second. You can go do it, but you should learn, you should try to gather some experience in putting these things together with us, okay? And then you can go off and go crazy. But we use a scalable, I'm going to change this right now, impact puzzle construct to define the storytelling experience and potential result as a puzzle is the creator labor translated into hard capital of equal pieces. Now, again, I come from the media production side of the economy, so everything that we do, no matter what it is like has a story to it. So, in some, if you're watching this from a different area of the economy where you're not story oriented, that part might not make very much sense. But just swap out story with goal. You'll keep up. Okay. Let Me Up Productions is the first studio in the history of global show business to utilize this use case for a production platform in our company ownership token collection, demonstrating proof of origin for the idea of both this paper and on the Ethereum blockchain on March 24th, 2021 at 9:09 p.m. UTC. And for now, we have to use this proof of origin that's directly on the blockchain because the marketplace that usually displays this proof of origin has it hidden. Who knows why? Okay, so it literally doesn't matter. Look, there's the burn flag. It appears every 2 days. 3/31/2021. This is one of the first pieces. This is the first piece in our brand that we ever transferred out. So, ignore that burn flag. That doesn't matter. They tried to burn it off the contract. They tried to delete my co-publishing effort. And now that will show up forever every couple of days on everybody's, I'll call them the OpenSea scars. Okay, going back to this. So the brand of Let Me Out Productions is the first brand. Press Pass Season 1 is the first television production. And the third note is, in our specific impact puzzle constructs, the company ownership tokens are also collaborative pieces of an impact puzzle. This fundamentally creates value and quality assurance for consumers through hard math portion of impact-based equity they're able to develop into collaborative property. So they're able to co-publish our brand. This property would otherwise be fully owned by an individual or a business or like a small team. So think about that. Normally, it would be owned by the 21 founders, including I'm the founder. We have 2 co-founders. We have a board of regents, founding advisors, and that makes up a group of about 21 people. Oh, sorry, 20 people. The 21st party in this case is the group of folks that are developing and co-publishing the pieces on the public notary. And then the second use case that they just described was a specific strategy of forming a value and quality assured definition of property. So the first use case is using a non-fungible token as a puzzle piece in a container. The second use case is how to define the container. So that's the big clarity. That's the point of clarity I wanted to land on. The second use case, you write a deed to establish your property. In the United States, a deed is established with fixed points, measurable distances, and impartial witness. Blockchain has all 3 built in, so you are good to go. I could do a find and replace, but I'm just catching this as I'm going along. So again, forming a value and quality assured definition of property with a deed that fractionalizes ownership or other rights over a shared endeavor or asset and assigning those parts to token IDs of puzzle pieces is open source, and now you have a co-publishing system. You've branded this use case as a scalable impact puzzle. Additional terms include the scalable storytelling puzzle, the distributed equity ecosystem, and or a blockchain ecosystem. So first use case, second use case, and you see this honestly throughout blockchain all over the place. You don't see the Dolby 5.0 credit that we've asked for to point back to us that just says, this project employs information from the LMO structure for tokenomics, an open source arrangement of fundamental use cases for producing impact puzzles with blockchain technology. So if you learned anything about co-publishing from this paper, please put this on your project. It helps us. It helps our market. You're co-publishing the behavior of co-publishing and not trying to silo that off for yourself. That was crazy behavior. Okay, let's let them keep shit. This is the best one I've ever heard. They're doing a great job. I've done this like 50 different times with these guys.
Puzzle, which again we're calling an impact puzzle or scalable impact puzzle. It also goes by names like the scalable storytelling puzzle, the distributed equity ecosystem, or even a blockchain ecosystem. Lots of terms, same core idea. Fractional ownership for collaboration.
Got it. And use case 3.
Use case number 3. This focuses on the distribution of those puzzle pieces, specifically distributing what are also called proof of labor pieces to the hired collaborators.
The people doing the work.
Exactly. The purpose is to anchor their equity stake for future net earnings. It directly links their work contribution to a share of the profits. This system is also open source.
Okay.
And it's branded as equity-based labor with commission, or simply a proof of labor system. But here's a key detail. Use case 3 requires use case 2 as its foundation. You need the fractionalized ownership structure in place before you can distribute the proof of labor pieces. They build on each other.
Right, that makes sense. Okay, this is crucial though. It sounds like a lot is open source, but maybe not everything. Does this mean all of Let Me Out Productions' own IP is just out there for anyone to use? That seems unlikely.
That's a really important distinction, and you're right, it's not all open. The framework is clear on this. While the basic impact puzzle mark of trade itself is open source for the hashtag Film7 community, whoever they are to use,
Okay.
many of the specific applications and the underlying intellectual properties developed by Let Me Out Productions are definitely not open source. They are proprietary.
Like what? Give us examples.
Okay, for instance, Press Pass, all access. That's identified as an IP franchise belonging solely to Kimani Okearah, strictly not open source, protected.
Got it.
Then you have projects like Press Pass Season 1, the musical Bears thing, Shirley though,
Yeah.
Louis Sips. These are impact puzzles, SIPS, that create distributed assets with collaborating communities. But the assets themselves, the content, the specific implementation, not open source.
Okay, that's clear. The method might have open parts, but the resulting products aren't necessarily free for all.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Same goes for...
Thank you for clarifying that. And honestly, thank you to the market so far for being super respectful. I have to be clear, like, the method that we're trying to teach, that's been chopped at the knees 50 million different ways because people are trying to combat and compete over the precedent, but they don't have the expertise that I have, period. Okay? Like, I'm 10 toes down on business on that at this point. I've had 4 years of contrast. That's a clown parade. This is the only answer. I'm sorry. But anyway, but I'm glad they clarified that. We do have publications that we are producing, like our brand itself. Press Pass, Musical Bears, Surely Though, anything that Let Me Out Productions is putting out as a product, a service, an experience, a distributed asset, those are not open source outputs. But the structure of building outputs as a co-publishing structure, as an impact puzzle, that's open source. In fact, we literally want every brand, we want every entity doing this because it builds a customer base where everybody's doing this. We buy the titles and it's on our phone, and now we're publishing results. The results are now in the market, earning compound value, and we just do this. We just keep doing it. Just every day. Title, result, title, result, title, result. Whether you're hired to do it or you're buying the titles and doing it that way. Like we could have this economy, a co-published event-based economy in a year and a half, and everybody's thriving. No homeless people. I'm not playing around. It's not even utopia. It's just hard math. Okay. All right. Let's let them keep on carving it up. They're doing. I'm
The top brass DAO. That's a subgroup within LMO. Its name, its workflows, its structures, marketing, network.
Hold on. It's not actually a subgroup within LMO. It's a separate organization, but it's a sub DAO, which means that it runs a department of Let Me Out Productions. The name, workflow, constructs, layers of interaction, marketing, and network are our intellectual properties belonging to the DAO itself, and are specifically not open source in any way, shape, form, or format, nor can this be misconstrued.
All that is IP belonging to the DAO itself, not open source.
Right.
And basically, any info about LMO that isn't explicitly laid out in their main paper, specific website code, internal roadmaps, development systems, even document formats, that's all proprietary too.
Yeah.
It belongs to the LMO platform unless they explicitly grant rights otherwise.
And what about the specific names, like Scalable Intellectual Property Puzzle? Can anyone just slap that label on their project?
No, that's another key proprietary piece. Scalable Intellectual Property Puzzle, SIPP, and Scalable Storytelling Puzzle are specifically minted trademarks. They belong to Let Me Out Productions for their exclusive products and experiences.
So they're
To clarify on that, Scalable Impact Puzzle's open. Like, I don't know what they're talking about. Scalable Impact Puzzle, if you want to call your thing an impact puzzle, go for it. That's exactly that's what it's called. That's what the co-publishing structure is. It's an impact puzzle. We're co-publishing with each piece that deposits impact into the result, into the wide result. And now everybody's specific result is titled as their property using the puzzle piece. So that's the impact puzzle. That's open source. Please don't listen to these bot podcast hosts. You can use impact puzzle. Things like a chain puzzle, storytelling puzzle, things like that. That's something that's where we said, hey, we're the first people saying this. So we're going to use those as our specific methods of output within our collective. However, our collective's huge, and everybody who's co-publishing the collective brand has open access to those shares. You're co-publishing with those marks of trade. So if you want to co-publish a storytelling puzzle, or you want to co-publish an on-chain garden, or a Vader blood garden, or a Vader blood puzzle, these things, that's why you would want a piece of the brand. One of the 15 ways you can co-publish the pieces of our Let Me Out Productions brand. So just to clarify on that, impact puzzle, go for it, everybody. The entire world can call whatever intellectual property you're co-publishing an impact puzzle, provided there's at least enough puzzle pieces within for multiple people to create impact. It's pretty simple. All right?
3 pieces.
Yeah. We do have our constructs that are built for sustainability and built for great market strength, but we're going to keep those behind the scenes so people actually co-publish our brand and stop trying to wipe their ass with us for clout.
protected brands.
Correct. LMO doesn't license them out freely. They do, however, sort of invite people to join their ecosystem by collecting a piece of the very first SIP built on the blockchain if they want to use those specific trademarks legitimately within that context.
Okay. And they have rules about competition too.
They do. They explicitly state that if someone tries to repurpose LMO's information just to counter-market against them, against their practices, products, or market position, that's considered anti-competitive and potentially subject to U.S. antitrust laws.
Wow. Okay. Playing hardball.
Well, protecting
not
their
playing
innovation,
hardball.
presumably.
Sorry,
And
guys. It's just we've been out on the market for 4 years, and there's been a lot of crap. So that's why they're talking about that. But don't actually worry about that too much. Just respect what you're learning and respect where you're learning it from, and you shouldn't run into any issues, like at all, just like normal. All right, the problem is for the first few people we taught, some of them were very unethical, unfortunately for the market.
Add that to be a certified representative for their information. To really engage legitimately, you need to collect one of their company ownership tokens. It shows you're part of the system, not just trying to exploit it from the outside.
Right. So a very clear line between the foundational open source ideas and the specific protected applications and brands built by LMO on top of them.
Precisely. It's a nuanced approach to intellectual property.
Okay, so Let Me Out Productions is clearly the testbed, the living example of these impact puzzle concepts. You mentioned its history a bit, but can you recap for the listener how LMO itself has evolved since Kimani Okearah started it back in 2007?
Sure. So, Let Me Out Productions,
Let's pause just for a second because it seems like they skipped 3 of the use cases, and that's funny because they're exactly like a real podcast host where they went on a tangent, dude. But so let me keep them focused. This is why it's a great dynamic. They were talking about the use cases and establishing the impact puzzle paper. So they talked about the first 3. Using the NFT as a publishing title, arranging a property as a deed into a puzzle, and then using the NFTs as publishing titles to put that puzzle together. The third use case is separating out a portion of that puzzle as a proof of labor system and how that proof of labor system works. The fourth use case is the specific use case is separate from everything we just said. That's why I wanted to clarify. You can also use the non-fungible token, remember, a codable piece of titled property on the blockchain, as a collectible gateway for content distribution and rights enforcement. So, for example, when we finished Press Pass Season 1 and we put out our first, when we put out 24 episodes, we'll put them in a like an escrow delivery container that can only be accessed by these distribution gates. And the people that own the distribution gates will be able to take that content, put it into their streaming archive, put it onto their distribute it within terms, and then as long as they adhere to the distribution rights agreement within the gate, they're good. And that means we're recouping our value within what the agreement says, and the distributor is able to monetize as they wish within the terms of that gate. So it's a beautiful thing. And the other nice thing is the distributor can sell the gate when they're done. So there's no world where Press Pass Season 1 is just going to be purchased by a distributor, and then shelved, and then nobody gets to see it. That's nonsense. No. If you're done with it, sell it to Tubi, sell it to Roku, sell it to whatever streaming platform exists in Turkey or Mongolia or wherever the hell. You know what I mean? But if you're done with it on the shelf and you don't want it in your archive anymore, move on. It's that easy. But we will be distributing our output, especially at the Tier 1 and Tier 2 level, that way. The fifth use case is the specific use case of forming and or hiring a sub-DAO to run a department of your platform or of your production to facilitate the collaborative community wealth system. So basically, if a DAO exists, you can hire that DAO to run a department, and now everybody who has has publishing titles in the property, they're actually the ones that are running the DAO. The DAO can be organized around the publishing titles. The DAO is now hired to run the department or run of the brand or of the production, and now your co-publishers are literally a budgeted part of that production, all within legal constructs, because the DAO is a third-party organization that is hired to help complete the result. That third-party organization is inherently defined and made up of the publishing titles, the owners of the publishing titles. That's what makes it a decentralized organization. There's no group that controls that. It's just the people who own the titles. So that's what a DAO means, decentralized autonomous organization. And then the sixth use case is, I also want to be clear because some people might run off. I didn't come up with DAO. I didn't establish the idea of a DAO. It's just hiring a DAO to run a department of a platform. I wanted to put that in here as a use case, okay? To facilitate the co-publishing. So basically, your co-publishing portions of your property can be more or less auto-published by the people that have the titles, because you're hiring them to self-facilitate with a portion of the project budget. It's really cool. The sixth use case is measuring the amount of tokens held by an individual. So co-publishers and their publishing titles, when they grow their amount, For example, Q has 4 bears, right? So we don't actually have an achievement system in there to reward yet. I don't know. That's like one of those puzzles where it's like you guys can kind of, as we go along,
Yeah, we'll figure it out.
you guys can figure it out. But let's just say he achieved like a tier that was previously built into musical bears. But once you get to 4, we call him like the Blade of Grass or something, and now he has that like official title. He's the Blade of Grass. You know, I don't know. But so that would be the collection benchmark achievement system. More publishing titles you own, the more committed you are to the result, obviously, and you can achieve benchmarks in your collection of these publishing titles, and theoretically increase your earnings from what's being done, create more results, increase your voting weight as well, especially when these co-publications get to a certain scale. You're going to have a lot of people that are basically going to provide all your governance. Anything that you don't want to be liable for, you can put out as a community decision, and then whatever the community says, go with that. And I love that sort of stuff, honestly. Take the wheel. All right, so we corrected them, and we're back on track. Went through the last 3 use cases.
LMO, founded 2007 by Kimani Okearah, started as a film and TV house, really emphasizing friendship, community, sustainability from day one.
Right.
That first phase, 07 to 12, was about making shorts, docs, but also crucially, studying the industry mechanics, looking for that path to platform independence and sustainability. Not just content creation, but system building.
Got it. Laying the groundwork.
Then the next phase, roughly 2012 to 2021, LMO functioned more as a service provider, supporting bigger production houses, doing digital media work, videos, graphics, websites, mainly in Northern California, getting that deep, practical, probably sometimes frustrating experience.
Yeah, seeing the sausage get made, as they say.
Exactly. And then, early 2021, the big commitment. Okearah goes full-time on LMO, aiming to embed creator equity into the industry in perpetuity. That's when the focus really sharpens on implementing this impact puzzle vision. And LMO today is described as a service studio privately organized as a professional resource collective.
In the same format as a community garden. I like that analogy. It really paints a picture of shared work, shared resources, shared benefits.
It does. It suggests this nurtured collaborative environment. Now, in terms of structure, legally...
Yeah, how is it set up?
Okay, so Mr. Okearah is registered with California as the original sole owner of the LLC Let Me Out Productions, LLC, and the overall brand concept.
Standard enough so far?
Right. But his chosen method for actually forming partnerships and creating products within this structure is something called the limited deed of partnership.
Okay, a specific legal instrument.
Yeah. And here's where it gets really unique and foundational. Kimani Okearah identifies, first and foremost, as a citizen of Kaw Nation. This comes through his biological grandmother.
Okay, an indigenous connection.
A very significant one. Because the deed of partnership itself explicitly states, and this is a direct quote essentially, that all legal perspectives pertaining to and defining the ability to claim, define, and transact ownership and the custody of ownership over property are determined first, foremost, and finally by Kaw Nation.
Whoa. Okay, unpack that. That sounds huge.
It is huge. It means the fundamental legal and philosophical basis for property ownership within LMO isn't just U.S. corporate law. It's rooted primarily in the legal perspectives and principles of Kaw Nation.
So indigenous law takes precedence in defining ownership within their system.
That's what it explicitly states in the deed. It's a powerful, intentional grounding of the entire impact puzzle methodology in a specific indigenous legal and ethical framework. It sets it apart fundamentally from typical corporate structures.
That is incredibly intentional. Wow. Okay, so given that unique foundation, how does LMO specifically define intellectual property within their system? You mentioned different categories before.
Right. They use 2 main terms to manage IP within their impact puzzle system, their SIP framework. First, you have the franchise, which they also call storyworld.
Okay, story world, like the whole universe of a creation.
Exactly.
Let's also include brands in there too. So like a brand, like Oreo is a brand. You have the entity of Mondelez International. They own Oreo. They manage Oreo. And Oreo is a brand that outputs cookies. Within that brand, they output a ton of cookies. They also output ice cream. They output ice cream bars. They output candy. They output all sorts of things. They do all sorts of co-brands with toys, fast food joints, everything. So that brand actually does a lot of stuff. and we should co-publish it. I'm just saying, Mondelez, hire us. We're right here. You guys could kick us a little bit. We'll be. Where are you guys at? Michigan or something? Well, we'll have a plane. Let's go. Let's co-publish the economy. Anyway, so a franchise or a brand, that is your umbrella property. Those can be co-published with an impact puzzle. They can be co-published against a rootkit, which means the first existence of that franchise or the brand. Expansion. And they can also be co-published against a window of time. So after the root existence, once it gets to the root existence, then you're just co-publishing an annual year. So every year has its own impact puzzle. Every year is a new publication. And that's how some of the net profit of that publication is distributed for that year. Is against the results produced on the impact puzzle methodology. You are beaten. It is useless to resist. Don't let yourself be destroyed. As Toby Wan did. Huh? Toby Wan? Doesn't that change everything? Tobias Wan. Tobias Wan. Please, can we put a Tobias Wan in Star Wars? For me. Okay. Where were we?
The big IP wrapper contains the core story, the characters, all the storytelling possibilities, past, present, future. Unlimited potential.
Got it.
Now, the impact puzzle structure, the SIP, is designed to let creators keep 100% original ownership of that storyworld asset, the root IP, while still maximizing the value of the other assets that get distributed out to the audience.
How does that work practically?
By minting a deed for that franchise to the blockchain. This lets the creator formally establish their IP franchise as an asset, potentially at no cost if it's well defined. It secures their core ownership.
Okay, so franchise story world is the big picture. What's the second term?
The second term is distributed asset. This is different. It's an IP wrapper that limits the asset to a specific thing, like one movie or one season of a TV show or some other distinct cinematic experience.
So more contained, finite.
Right. Unlike the franchise, which is unlimited, a distributed asset forms a relationship with the audience in a limited way.
Yeah.
And the idea is to grow the value of the franchise, you create new distributed assets for the audience to enjoy and engage with.
Makes sense. Little pieces spun off from the main
story. Sorry, I get so sick of companies that fold. Like Sports Illustrated, you know how they folded? It's like, just come up with new things. Like, okay, we're not buying magazines, but you still have a really strong brand.
Mm-hmm.
That's a strong brand. How are you folding that?
Good name.
Find something else to do. And if you need to turn it over to us and be like, hey, community, we don't even know what else to produce, but we have this really strong brand. What should we produce? We'll come up with something. But this is ridiculous. What are we doing? You know, they fired hella people overnight one night. This was happened like 6 months ago because the corporate entity that was managing Sports Illustrated decided it wasn't going to make any money over this next 5-year window or whatever, so they just decided to file bankruptcy and cut everybody. And I think I don't want to get the number of personnel wrong because it could be like 300 people, it could be 6,000 people. I don't fucking know. But the point is, one day you're going to work. Mm-hmm. And you're sweeping the building at Sports Illustrated, or you're filing your reports, or you're editing, or whatever the hell it is that you're doing, graphic design, mm-hmm. And then the next day you get that pink slip, mm-hmm. And you're saying, "Oh, you know, you will not be going to work anymore. Here's your initial severance, and then you have to sue us for anything else."
Time to co-publish the economy.
Got to co-publish the economy because that doesn't work for anybody.
Mm-hmm.
What I just described just doesn't work. It doesn't work for the investors.
What does work?
Co-publishing Sports Illustrated as a brand. You establish the root kit, Sports Illustrated. Co-publish that against 100,000 publishing titles. You do 84% for the entity, 16% public. Now 16,000 of us get to buy a publishing title in Sports Illustrated, and now we get to do something that creates a result to help Sports Illustrated exist again, and now the 16,000 people are your voting. If there's 16,000 people, I don't know, we have that collection benchmark thing. Mm-hmm. But let's just say there's 5,000 to 8,000 people co-publishing that Sports Illustrated brand, right? Because a lot of people are going to buy more than one. You have all these people creating results. They're also governing. They're helping. Now you have by the way, 16,000 titles selling out at $50 a pop. Woo! Some pretty good hiring right there.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, you can hire a small team for and have a runway for Sports Illustrated to bring that bad boy back and actually do a print magazine. But now, if I buy a publishing title and I get to contribute something that's in that print magazine, well, then I'll do it, right? Like, then I go, okay, great. Maybe I'll do a cover, or maybe I'll do like you start covering, you do a 5-chapter magazine, and every chapter is a new cover, that kind of thing. And if I co-publish, I can deposit a cover into the magazine. And now I'm getting a per edition, like, when there's 5 people that did the cover, so hey, every issue that sells, you guys each get 5 cents in an issue. Okay, well, what? Okay, and then it goes, it's the world, and all. Maybe you guys weren't selling too many magazines before, but I'll tell you what, for me, if for you guys in the entity, 50,000 magazines isn't a lot. For me, that's plenty of magazines.
50,000?
Because I paid $50 for the publishing title. I put my cover in. I'm getting 25 cents an issue, whatever it is. The magazine, what? It's gonna be $4 or $5 an issue on the shelf. So I'm getting 5 cents an issue for my as my publisher commission. We go sell 100,000 issues, which again for the entity they want to see millions sold off the shelf. But for me, I do the math: 100,000 times 25 cents.
How many years are we looking?
What is that? That would when we're talking this level, you're think about how every Safeway has a magazine rack.
Oh, every single one.
You know what I mean? How every grocery store has.
a brand.
So that's who the actual customer is. So your 100,000 units are pre-ordered.
Yeah.
Like,
it's part of your supply chain.
yeah, it's just like that's built in. So those pre-orders aren't large enough for the entity to be continued to be interested in continuing to print Sports Illustrated. Because if the pre-orders are coming in, they're saying, okay, we're only getting 150,000 issues ordered. It's not enough. Like, it's just not. They can't earn enough revenue off that unless they co-publish it.
Yeah.
If they co-publish it, they can keep it kind of a smaller brand, a kind of a niche presentation. They can go seek out stories, be a story-oriented sports publication.
Sounds pretty creative.
And everybody loves the underdog. So if you're constantly focused on pulling in, calling the underdog, like, can you imagine if you were one of them journalists like me who called Tyrese Halliburton? I'm a photojournalist, okay, it counts. But yeah, I knew Tyrese Halliburton was going to be a super duper star, and now he's leading the Pacers. They're doing what's today? Is today Saturday? Today's Friday. Okay, so Sunday, Game 7. I kind of want to go somewhere for that.
Sounds good. What do you think? Where does the...
I don't know. The Zebra Club's the trash bar, but like,
Bar.
I don't drink, so...
Bar?
Well, we can go somewhere classy.
Yeah.
We're a classy bunch over here. Okay, let's get back into the thing. So, but yeah, I think co-publishing brands, just to reintroduce what they were talking about, there's 3 ways to do it. You can co-publish a brand as a rootkit, so this thing doesn't exist, now it exists, and here's the publishing container for that. Then, after that exists, you can do expansions. Hey, this is the brand blue edition. This is the brand red edition. Or you could do windows of time, and I encourage people to think about both approaches. So if you're going to do limited releases, where it's just like your brand doesn't have an obligation to a schedule, but you are going to do brand red edition or blue edition, and maybe you're going to be 3 or 4 years apart from these editions, that's perfect. Now you're not obligating yourself as a manager to having that constant output. Maybe you do an expansion every couple of years. I don't know how else to put it, but you hit basically a market lottery. Yeah. It's earned, but it's not like lucky. But you hit the market lottery, so you're good, and the revenue that you make off that expansion sustains you for a while, and then you print another one when it's time.
Seasons.
Yeah, exactly. No, in fact, I think I had that down somewhere as calling them seasons or chapters or something like that. So you can do expansions into seasons of your brand or of your franchise. You can do the annual window. So like a Jimmy Fallon show, if they wanted to co-publish 2025, that'd be Jimmy Fallon 2025, Jimmy Fallon 2026, 27, etc., etc. So annual products, Oreo would do the same thing. Oreo could co-publish 2025 Oreo, 2026 Oreo, etc. And those I'm not going to give you guys all the sauce. That's why you buy and you help us co-publish our brand. But we'll come in there. I got tons of ideas for shelf products like that. Like
he's got drip.
Well, our whole team is getting equipped to think about this at a high level, so they can come in there and think about how many different ways the customer can create a permanent result that helps that product, helps that service, helps that experience, helps your brand, helps your franchise.
Okay.
And then we organize a series of publishing titles that create all of these different results that are getting created anyway. I want to be clear. You need special packaging for things anyway. Now you can localize it. Now you can be like, oh, we at Oreo, we could do sports team packages for every community and for every professional sport. Let's co-brand with these pro sports, and we'll co-publish them and we'll do limited releases. So now there's 500 packages of every single kind of Oreo with a co-published package, and I'm getting $3 a package because I did the art or something. That's probably Oreos are $5, right? Okay, well, I'll get $2 a package because I did the art for the packaging. $2 times 500, $1,000.
Not bad.
Shit. So I buy the publishing title for $25-$50. Publish a result. The result prints me $1,000. Hell yeah! And I'm buying a couple of them Oreo packets too. I'm never opening them. You know, like it's like that's gonna be a culture too. Yeah. And then now all of a sudden you have that limited print 500 package San Francisco Giants Oreo co-publication that nobody actually opened. Nobody actually opened a single package of that. Because and that's kind of what we're talking about. My grandmother, Virginia Barnes, used to save food.
Like the Wheatie boxes?
Yeah, but she would the food would still be in there, and sometimes she would do it with fast food.
Oh, wow.
Like she'd order a burger with a special wrapper and then keep the burger.
Yeah. I mean, it probably still was good, huh?
I wouldn't eat it, but they just turn rock hard. They just turn brick hard all the way through.
Petrified.
Don't even get moldy.
That's what I'm saying. Got the forever spray.
It's turned into rocks. She did it with a McDonald's burger, and that thing turned into a rock. And I'm like, she even showed me one time. I was like, this is really weird. This is extremely weird behavior. But so rootkit, expansions, as Q said, seasons, you can call them seasons, and then annual windows as well for brands and franchises. For products, like a product is a product. So if you want to go make a specific Nerf gun, co-publish that specific Nerf gun. If you want to co-publish a specific experience, like the Fire Festival, I'm kidding, don't do that one. But Outside Lands or something like that, you want to co-publish a music festival, that's an experience. You can do that. You can co-publish a distributed asset, like what we do for Press Pass. That's a distributed asset. It's a TV show. A service. My ex-girlfriend is an esthetician, so she could co-publish her service. So we have...
Storyworld. Can creators share ownership of these?
Yes. They can fractionalize ownership over both the franchise and the distributed asset if they want to.
Okay.
For the franchise, maybe you do that if the original idea came from multiple people, or if the creator just philosophically wants to legally decentralize their story world.
Right.
For distributed assets, that fractionalization happens by minting a pool of NFTs, those non-fungible tokens. Again, typically in at least...
Hold on, not the pool. You don't have to mint the whole pool. You can do a co-published supply. As long as the deed states what the supply is and that's minted, and you as an ethical person are going to stick to that hard cap, you're good. So if you have that established, what the supply cap is, then you can co-publish the supply. You don't have to print. Like our brand has 500,000 pieces in that puzzle. I'm not printing all 500,000 pieces. It's not that we're co-publishing the supply, and then once we get to the full 80,000 co-published supply, then we'll print the founder and the co-founder positions out of pooled pieces. But you don't have to have the supply of pieces all available at one time. That's what Bored Apes did, and I think it triggered a gambling response. They didn't intend that, but I guess kind of they did. The brand's called Bored Apes. Bear Eat Ape. That's what the podcast is called. Again, no shade to the apes. Honestly, it's all love. I think it's so funny, the whole thing at this point. We're all just co-publishing, and we're notary neighbors. Hooray.
These 3 artistically unique collectible versions.
Why 3 versions?
Good question. The source mentions it specifically, likely for different access tiers or collectible appeal, maybe related to the lore producer roles we'll discuss later. But the key is, these NFTs reflect the fractional ownership parts. They allow people to transact these parts while staying compliant with US regulations.
So the NFT is the collectible.
It is, but it's more than that.
The 3 artistic unique editions, that's important because if I'm buying a publishing title, it needs to be something that's a little different than his publishing title. So, and I need to have the option. So if the customer-facing pieces have at least 2 editions where he can buy the version 2 and I can buy the version 1, then we have a different. We can buy a publishing title. We can create different results than one another. So that diversifies the uniqueness of results that you're getting in the puzzle, and it protects that asset from being seen as a secure deposit of value. So when you have 2 different versions of a publishing title, 2 different things that the publishing titles can do, then I can choose one. Now I have choice, I have options, and there's no secure deposit in one or the other. I hope that makes sense. And then the 3rd edition would be your proof of labor system. So again, on centralized builds for brands, products, services, experiences, distributed assets, we do a proof of labor system at 20% of our output, of the 20% publishing, 20% of the ownership of Press Pass Season 1, for example, will go to the labor that's putting together Season 1. It's over 650 people.
There's a deed of assignment, another legal document that assigns 100% of that distributed assets ownership directly to 100% of the unique NFT token IDs in that pool.
Wait, say that again? 100% of the ownership goes to the token IDs?
To the token IDs, which means literally every single project collaborator,
Okay.
cast, crew, writers, staff, artists, musicians, doesn't matter if they're above the line or below the line, they all share ownership in that specific distributed asset through the tokens they receive or acquire.
Whoa. That completely changes the power dynamic, doesn't it?
Fundamentally, it takes franchise ownership off the traditional negotiating table. A distributor, for example, can't just kill the property if they walk away. They can only cancel their tokenized relationship with it. The property itself, owned collectively by its creators and collaborators via the tokens, persists.
That gives creators and collaborators way more control and staying power over their work.
Exactly. That's a core goal of the system.
Okay, so these tokens, they're not just digital pictures. They represent real fractional ownership and a way to participate in this impact puzzle system. Can you tell us more about the company ownership tokens for Let Me Out Productions itself? What do they actually grant the holder, and maybe, just as importantly, what don't they grant?
Right. The company ownership tokens, these are specific to LMO, the entity. There's a fixed hard cap, 500,000 of them minted, each artistically unique. Now, first things first, the source is very clear. Buying these is not positioned as buying an investment in the traditional financial sense. LMO doesn't promote or sell them that way, likely for regulatory reasons.
Okay, important disclaimer. But they do carry rights within the LMO ecosystem.
They do, significant ones. Holding these tokens gives you participatory access to the top brass DAO, that's the Decentralized Autonomous Organization, LMO, set up to run their Ministry of Audience Experience. So a way to have a say in how the audience interacts.
Okay, community governance on audience experience.
Kind of, yeah. Holders also get into company ownership, collective clubs, social spaces online or maybe offline, and they can even pitch projects directly to LMO's creative board, though there are conditions on that, naturally.
Sounds like ways to get involved, be part of the community.
Yeah.
But what about actual control over LMO, the company? Is this like buying shares?
No. And this is crucial. This source is emphatic. These company ownership tokens carry zero rights to governance in and of Let Me Out Productions, LLC. Zero.
Okay, crystal clear. No voting on company decisions.
None. They also carry zero rights to governance in and of the LMO brand itself, unless something separate explicitly defines that. No rights to administration, no creative control.
I want to be clear, there's plenty of language that specifically assigns governance and specific roles, but no general governance of being like, oh, I own this publishing title, so now I generally get a say in the day-to-day decision-making of what that brand is doing or what the business is doing. That's not how this works. So that's why that language is clear. They're kind of going into it kind of heavy.
over LMO's operations. And owning a token doesn't automatically guarantee you access to the actual films or shows the distributed assets. That's not guaranteed.
Right.
Furthermore, they carry no ability to generate passive financial reward from the work of others that isn't directly tied to the specific fractional ownership the token represents. You're not getting dividends just because the company does well in some unrelated area.
Yeah. And they have market risk.
Yes, subject to traditional market risk, like any collectible asset whose value might fluctuate. The tokens themselves are positioned strictly as collectible art. They don't come with legally binding paperwork in the way a stock certificate would. No security of ownership guarantees in that traditional sense.
Okay, that sounds like a lot of limitations. You said 0 governance rights. But earlier you mentioned fractional ownership of the brand. How can it be ownership if there are no governance rights? That seems contradictory.
It does seem contradictory from a traditional perspective, but this is where the unique legal structure of the impact puzzle comes in. Remember, these are NFTs, each with a unique...
He's probably going to go into it, but like he's about to say, each piece has its own governance over its own specific result. So your governance is you're publishing your own result. You're not making governance decisions in what we are publishing as a brand. Like in the process of deciding whether or not to make Press Pass Season 1, that's not something that we necessarily put out to the community at large. We have a system where we onboard projects every year. The only projects that we make after Press Pass Season 1, after our initial flagships, are actually onboarded through community governance. So don't be scared at not having a say in what we're doing and what we're making. But those rights are very specifically assigned to every specific publishing title and not assigned, generally speaking, to the wider property.
Permanent token ID.
And the other reason for that is because your labor is receiving publishing titles as well. So when the publishing titles, the governance is limited to what the specific title says it's limited to. That's very useful. And you can provide everybody governance. You can provide governance as wide as you want. You can provide governance as limited as you want. But that's the whole point of that specific language. So want to clarify that.
On the blockchain.
Right.
So the founder, Kimani Okearah, has chosen to legally represent, define, and assign ownership fractions of the LMO brand itself directly to each of those 500,000 unique token identification numbers.
Assigning ownership to the number, not the person holding it.
To the token ID itself, as recorded in the deed of partnership. This assignment is immutable. It can't be changed or taken back from the deed. So, for example, if you hold just one company ownership token, the deed certifies that that specific token ID owns 0.00002% of the Let Me Out Productions brand.
So the ownership is tokenized. It travels with the token ID, whoever holds it, but without conferring traditional shareholder rights. And it decentralizes identity because the owner isn't named in the deed.
Exactly. It's a way to distribute a genuine, legally defined piece of the company's brand ownership to the community members who hold the tokens. It fosters that sense of belonging, a real stake, but it does so without triggering the complex regulations around traditional securities or giving up centralized control of the LLC's operations. It's innovative.
Definitely innovative. Are there different levels of this tokenized ownership?
Yes, there are tiered benefits based on how many tokens you hold. This incentivizes deeper participation. For example, if you collect and hold 1% of the total supply, that's 5,000 tokens, you become a top brass boss.
Okay, top brass boss, what does that get you?
That tier gets you a percentage of the platform's net profit, directly reflecting your 1% ownership. Plus, you get 100% voting power in the top brass DAO decisions, specifically related to audience experience, with a defined level of liability associated with that role.
And the top tier?
The highest tier mentioned is top brass Don Regent. That requires holding 4% of the tokens, so 20,000.
Don Regent, okay.
This gets you your proportional share of platform net profit, plus a personal seat on LMO's creative board, one of only 4 such positions available. And you still get 100% DAO voting power, again with a specific liability level.
A seat on the creative board is significant.
Very. Though the source is careful to note, even Don Regents don't get unilateral creative control. They're collaborative members.
Right. So, given all this complexity and ambition, what's the current situation for LMO? What's their focus now?
According to the source material, which is dated September 2023, the main focus for LMO is, frankly, survival in the current market. Plus, adding customers, and continuing to develop these collaborative IPs using their SIP systems.
And how's the token adoption going?
The progress report mentioned showed a fairly low percentage of the total company ownership token pool had been collected at that point, about 0.0142%.
Small start.
Yeah. And it also highlighted a pretty major roadblock. The report states that the marketplace they were using, OpenSea, operating the specific contract their tokens were built on, had illegally restrained trade by disabling their collection. This was apparently done without explanation after over 2 years of trading.
Wow. They just shut it down.
That's what the report claims, calling it a clear violation of antitrust law. It really underscores the challenges that even these innovative, decentralized systems can face when they still have to interact with existing centralized platforms and market structures.
Let's talk about that real quick. Yeah, OpenSea. The marketplace that we formed our publishing titles on provided a creator tool in 2021 that anybody could use to form publishing titles in containers. So we did that. And they've abused their authority over that tool. You could actually see it when I was on this piece earlier today. Let's refresh this. This is the 5th publishing title in the Let Me Out Productions brand. Let's go to the first one, which was actually sold in June, not March. So this is called a burn flag, and it says this NFT has been permanently burned by being sent to a designated burn address. It has not. The only person who can burn it is the actual owner of the title. But what happened was OpenSea here issued a burn command from their contract trying to scrub our publishing titles off of the Ethereum blockchain. And I don't know what kind of damage that did, but I do know that every couple of days this burn flag appears, notarizing that assault on co-publishing a brand. And they did outright. There are so many angles that assaulted us for co-publishing using non-fungible tokens, just behaving a different way. And all of these pieces, the ones that they tried to hurt, they still work, baby. Y'all can't do nothing. So let's get back to it.
Not always smooth sailing.
Okay, one of the things that really jumps out about impact puzzles, these SIPs for co-publishing the economy, is how they actually measure and reward the work, the labor. It's called the proof of labor system. How does that work in practice, especially for something like a film or TV show where people contribute in so many different ways and for different amounts of time?
Right, it needs to be flexible but also rigorous. And this system is designed to apply across different production types, film, TV season, even an annual product. The fundamental unit of measurement is the half-day block, the HDB.
Half-day block, okay. How's it calculated?
It's actually elegantly simple. Every 6 hours that a laborer is required to be on the project, within one single working day, earns them 1 HDB.
6 hours, 1 HDB.
Got it. But here's the key bit.
Yeah.
If they go over those 6 hours by even 1 minute, they earn another HDB for that day.
Oh, interesting. So it rounds up significantly.
Effectively, yes. If you work 6 hours and 1 minute, or if you work 12 hours, you get 2 HDBs for that day. If you work under 6 hours, say 5 hours and 59 minutes, you get 1 HDB.
Huh. That encourages efficient scheduling, maybe, but also ensures any significant time commitment beyond the basic block is recognized.
Exactly. It aims for fairness and ensures all required presence is accounted for, regardless of the exact duration within those blocks. Let's use an example from Press Pass Season 1 that the source provides. They mention a cast member A. This person worked 120 full 12-hour days. Right. Following the HDB rule, since 12 hours is more than 6, they get 2 HDBs per day. So 120 days times 2 HDBs. That's 240 HDBs accrued.
Simple enough.
There's cast member B, maybe a supporting role. They work 70 days, also 12-hour days. So 70 times 2 equals 140 HDBs.
Okay.
And the cast member C. This person worked 28 days total, but with a mix. 6 of those days were under 6 hours, so that's 6 days times 1 HDB per day, which is 6 HDBs.
Right.
The other 22 days, they were required for 8 hours. So 8 hours is over the 6-hour threshold. They get 2 HDBs for each of those days. So 22 times 2 is 44 HDBs.
Okay.
Add those together. 6 HDBs plus 44 HDBs equals 50 HDBs total for cast member C.
Gotcha. So the system allows for really granular tracking, even with varied schedules. It's not just about days worked, but about these quantified blocks of time commitment.
Precisely. The key isn't necessarily memorizing the numbers in the example, but seeing how the HD method provides a fair, consistent way to account for labor across very different roles and schedules. Every required block of time counts towards your earned equity stake.
Okay, so once you've meticulously counted everyone's labor in these half-day blocks, these HDBs, how does that turn into actual equity? How does the value pie get sliced up in this impact puzzle framework to make sure everyone gets their proportional share?
Good question. First, the system carves out 10% of the total puzzle pieces for the project. This 10% is specifically designated as an audience-exclusive consumer product.
The part for the fans, the collectors?
Exactly. It's designed to give the audience a way to directly collaborate, maybe in maintaining the project, merchandising, even enforcing quality or standards related to that distributed asset. It builds direct engagement.
Okay, 10% for the audience. What about the other 90%?
That remaining 90%. That constitutes the proof of labor system.
Right.
And within the scalable impact puzzle format, the SIP for co-publishing the economy, the equity split for that 90% is very clearly defined.
Lay it out.
Okay, the total puzzle pieces. 35% goes to the primary production house, the entity leading the project. 30% goes to the creator or the owner of the franchise storyworld.
Right, the originator.
Then a significant 20% is allocated specifically for labor, the cast, crew, everyone doing the work, and an additional 5% is reserved for relevant guilds and unions.
Interesting. Explicitly including guilds and unions.
Yeah, acknowledging their role
Yeah.
and presumably ensuring buy-in and support. So 35 plus 30 plus 20 plus 5, that's 90%. And the other
Real quickly, I'm in media production show business, so we have guilds and unions everywhere you look, and they collectively bargain what the labor standards are for making anything in the industry. So to enforce those labor standards, they often involve themselves in the productions to some degree. So we're going to welcome that and schedule specific days where they come and do their audits, and they can audit their collective bargaining agreement against what we're doing as a production house. And for what's appropriate to charge to personnel, they can charge to personnel. What's appropriate to charge to production and to the publisher, they can charge to the publisher. But that's how we can involve the unions into the quality guarantee and the CBA guarantee by just saying, hey, you're going to get proof of labor equity, 5%, shared between all of the unions relevant to this production if you guys enforce your own CBA. And during those training days, which can be a day, it can be 2 days, but they'll show up, they'll provide the audit as we're working, and then they can silo off a few hours and do a paid training for their for not just their members, but anybody who is relevant to the union. So maybe they don't have enough experience or enough credits to be in the union yet, but they're an assistant or they're an apprentice. They should be relevant to that training as well. And that's how we grow our craft. That's how we shore ourselves up against AI. As I'm using an AI podcast, huh? Hey, as far as I'm concerned, this is, I keep on joking with a few different people about this. It's like, well, they're not picking cotton, and it's not physical humans doing it, but objectively, can't we all just kind of get a kick out of that, you know? Sorry to whoever's voices these Floopy Miko and Sweet Blackberry are trained on. But yeah, this is great because I can't get a journalist to do their job and talk about this. So here we have the sophisticated language presented by podcasts in Bear Eat Ape. That's the name of the podcast. Bear Eat Ape. Bear Eat Ape. Bear Eat Ape. Co-publish the economy, where labor is your property. Co-publish the economy. Shove the duck up and sing on a bear.
10% is the audience piece.
Got it. Now, that 20% for labor, that's still a big group of diverse people. How is that pool divided up?
Right, it gets broken down further by department. This aims for fairness based on the typical expertise, time commitment, and liability associated with different roles. For Press Pass Season 1, the example shows that 20% labor pool gets dispersed like this. 6% is shared amongst the cast and re-edits team. Another 6% is shared by a broader group. Stage crew, art crew, post-production folks, office personnel, general production staff, and all the assistants.
Okay, grouping many departments there.
Yeah. And then a larger slice, 8%, is shared among the writers, producers, directors, composers, and cinematographers.
Reflecting maybe higher creative responsibility or leverage in traditional terms.
Potentially, or perhaps average time commitment or required expertise for those specific roles within that production structure. The key is that it's predefined.
Okay, so you have these departmental micropools. How does it get down to the individual person's share within, say, the art crew?
Great question. Here's the final calculation step. At the end of the project, at wrap, you take a specific department, like the art crew. You add up the total HDBs accrued by everyone in that department.
The department's total HDBs.
Right. Then for each individual in that department, you take their personal total HDBs and weigh it against the department's total. That gives you their individual impact percentage within that department.
Okay, their slice of the departmental pie.
Exactly. You then multiply that individual impact percentage by the micropool of equity assigned to that whole department, like the 6% for the art crew example group.
And that gives you?
That results in a specific and exact amount of proof of labor puzzle pieces. The actual number of NFTs or tokenized equity units for that individual laborer.
Wow.
And then a smart treasury system is set up. It reads the laborer's registered crypto wallet, sees how many puzzle pieces they hold, and automatically distributes their proportional share of the project's quarterly net profits.
So the HDBs you earn directly translate through these calculations into a quantifiable automated share of the actual earnings.
That's the system.
Yeah.
Truly merit-based, transparent, and directly linking contribution to reward.
This is incredibly detailed, right?
By the way, and we're going to go 10 toes down on this, and if we have to challenge regulators on this, we will. If a customer buys a title and they complete any result with that title that benefits what that's part of the rights processes and results assigned to that title, we're saying as a central publisher, we can pay them across from that equity a net profit deposit. It's not guaranteed. It's a choice that we are choosing to do to honor that commitment of that result to our publication. They're a publisher, that's their residual. So in the case of Let Me Out Productions here, 0.0002% of company ownership would anchor 0.0002% of the brand's net profits per quarter if the customer completed any of these results and published any of these results into the brand. The primary thing that we're doing is growing the behavior. So you buy one of these, you're going to grow it into as many impact puzzles as you want to release on our structure. By the time you do it 2 or 3 times, you'll know it like the back of your hand. You won't even need us. So then you sell it to somebody else and move on. And if you want, or if you want to just be a part of what we're doing and help us co-publish forever, that's also great. You can estate this as part of the estatable property now. So if your family is just going to be a co-publishing family and you want to be part of Let Me Out Productions forever as a legacy thing, I'm going to tear up because that's like kind of what we're building here. And if you want to launch that, and I'd be blessed and happy to be a part of all of the initial impact puzzles that really get this going at a high level, the right ones, the ones that do this at the highest level. Now, OpenSea, you got to fix some of this stuff, man, because you broke my short film here. This is called the flat tire pivot. I came out one day, my car had a flat tire, so I turned it into a piece of our brand, and this is it. It's 0.9 Ethereum. No, is it that high? No, it's 0.09 Ethereum. I don't think it's that high. But anyway, OpenSea switched their interface, and now the actual art doesn't show up just on OpenSea. It'll show up everywhere else. But it's annoying. So there you go, 216, everybody. Who wants to buy the Ghost Scarred token from... there it is. There you go, chat. Boom. Flat tire pivot. Please buy that one, somebody. It'll if you have a Rainbow wallet, which is a great publisher's wallet, it'll show up in your wallet, no problem. There's the rainbow.me. So wait, let me put the actual link there. Oh my gosh. What is wrong with me, chat? Chat. Kai Sinat. I'm a 35-year-old man. I want to go to your next streamer university. I'm a YouTube OG, man. Look at my Link hat. You see this bad boy? Woo! Link. He come to town. He come to save the Princess Zelda. Ganon took her away. Kimani loves the sound of his own voice, and he talks about himself in the third person like a douchebag. There we go. I really landed that last note there. Let's get back to this.
Down to the individual token representing a tiny fraction of ownership. What about those specific intellectual property tokens for Press Pass Season 1? How do they function, and how do they pull collectors into this whole collaborative ownership idea, almost making them part of the production team?
Right. Let's look at the Press Pass example specifically. For Season 1, the source states there are 5,309,160 of these intellectual property tokens minted.
Okay, a lot of pieces in that puzzle.
A very granular puzzle. And they're minted across those three artistically unique collectible versions, V1, V2, and V3. Now, each single token, regardless of version, carries exactly 0.00001835371320510% of certified ownership of Press Pass.
True.
Season 1.
Tiny slice, but a real slice.
A real defined slice. And these tokens are designed to work as a platform utility for profit management and audience participation. They are the foundational puzzle pieces of the IP for that specific season.
And how are they distributed initially?
Well, a big chunk of the V3 tokens, over 1 million of them, 1,061,832 specifically, are shared out amongst the 200 plus individuals who worked on Season 1.
The cast and crew we talked about earlier?
Exactly. Their assignments are calculated based on their HDBs, their days worked, or maybe predefined allocation percentages for certain roles. It ensures every employee, every contractor gets their share.
And how do they get paid from these tokens?
Those collaborators who receive tokens can connect their crypto wallet, the one holding the tokens, to a smart contract. This contract then automatically pays out their annual percentage share of the net profits in cryptocurrency, directly proportional to the number of tokens they hold out of that total minted supply.
And it can do agent splits. You heard that right.
So the proof of labor system feeds directly into this tokenized payout mechanism.
That's how it connects. The HDBs determine how many tokens you get, and the tokens determine your share of the profits managed by the...
Which also opens up agents to negotiate far more than just on-screen roles. So I've been a structure producer for damn near 20 years. No, I've already said 21 years specifically. 2004. I'm going to hold on to that. Okay, it was like March 2024. The first little... I even have it on DeviantArt. I'm not going to load it, though. Anyway. Yeah. So that'd be great. It'd be great to have somebody negotiate, hey, you know, this Marvel movie needs a line producer, or this commercial needs an assistant director. It's in your area. Like, that would be perfect. I would love that. But I kind of have maybe that going on right now. Who knows? Nobody ever calls me from that way. I think I'm a beloved human being in certain corners and just a hated person in other corners. But for what? We're co-publishing the economy. Stop soaking up all the compound value. Stop gambling on things that can soak up all the compound value and paying the managers of those things enough money to look the other way. This is sort of a ridiculous behavior. And stop calling me what you're calling me. No. No. Absolutely not. Nope. No.
Smart contract.
Okay, that covers the collaborators. What about the collectors, the audience members who buy these tokens? How do they get involved beyond just holding a collectible?
This is where the SIP framework really tried to empower the audience. First off, collectors get access to exclusive social media spaces just for token holders, and they're actively considered part of the lore producer team.
Lore producer, what does that mean?
It means they can actually contribute to the story world. There's a system called Collection Benchmark Achievement that integrates collectors into that top brass DAO we mentioned earlier. Based on how many tokens they collect, they get tiered voting power in DAO decisions and even assigned liability levels.
Liability for collectors?
Yeah, things
These
the
ones.
DAO participation comes with
ones right next
defined
to my
responsibilities, not just rights.
I guess I'll put
The
this in
tiers
chat.
range from paid, meaning just one token, which will grant 7.27% voting power in
can
the
only buy them in
DAO,
bulk.
Okay,
on
a low
OpenSea,
entry
so-
barrier.
all the way up to top brass minister. This requires holding at least 53,091 tokens, which is 1% of the total supply for Press Pass Season 1.
1%. And what does a minister get?
The benefits are pretty substantial. They receive a 1% collaborator equity issuance for Season 1. That includes 1% of all token residuals, distribution deal profits, advertising net profit, merchandising net profit, basically 1% of the season's earnings stream tied to that token pool.
Again, if they publish results, it's justified against the published result, not the inherent purchase. If it was justified against the inherent purchase, then the inherent purchase would be a secure deposit of value into that result. But here, we want the customer to buy 53,091 of these, really launching the behavior, and let the community enjoy producing them. You need 5,309 people to be like, yeah, I want to co-publish with that, sure. And then they each hop in, they form a character in the lore of Press Pass, and they role play in the Basketball Syndicate of America. We're doing 74 chapters of role-played lore. Each chapter has 300 people that role-play in it, and there's 30 teams. Some teams, only 12 teams have the full 74, and then a couple of them have dwindling windows to lore play. So they create a character, just like they do in a video game or Dungeons and Dragons or something else. That character actually goes directly on our published wiki. You can see, let's go to Lonnie Weeb here. You know what, I want to use my own guy. I already put time into him. Here's ABK, Aaron Pooh Kellogg. Level 27 team coach, the 1939 Boston Potatoes. He's an assistant coach, authentic good, critical, gifted ink, starch up and tate on. Tate is going to tate. Coach Aaron Pooh Kellogg, okay? He was born in Jackman, Maine in 1906. He grew up playing basketball on a concrete dock off the shores of a local lake. His dad, Gunther Kellogg, was an esteemed farmer who had escaped sharecropping in South Carolina with his wife, Shmee. Aaron's parents and two brothers were well-known garlic farmers in Jackman, astonishing the locals with their ability to efficiently grow garlic in Maine. Aaron Kellogg played the budding sport of basketball in his local high school, his junior college team, and his barbershop quartet. The quartet played 4-on-5 purely on principle and often tied one arm behind their backs as a challenge. It was in the quartet that he fell in love with the game, and he knew that he wanted to pursue a career in coaching. In 1939, he became an assistant coach for the Boston Potatoes, one of the original 12 teams in the BCFA. Aaron was known for his critical demeanor on the sideline, something he inherited from his garlic-soaked parents. He pushed his players to be their best and was not afraid to use tough love to help them improve. Despite his harshness, Aaron was genuinely invested in the success of the team and wanted them to succeed at the highest level. He hoped to inspire the team with his a cappella music and hoped to help them achieve team success as high as his octaves. In January of 1939, he felt that the team was on the right track, but they needed to continue to work hard and refine their skills. His playbook designs, which he drew at the orders of head coach Allison Narling, were something to behold. Coach Kellogg is the originator of the Gifted Ink playbook used in the BCFA. Aaron brought a unique energy to the team atmosphere as a coach who was creative and innovative, constantly drawing up new strategies and beautiful penmanship to support team morale and player focus. Aaron was not one to shy away from media attention. He was confident in his coaching abilities and was always willing to defend his team and their performance. My nephew's in the other room, so if you hear banging on the door or a small voice, that's my nephew Lunas. But the door's locked, Lunas! What are you gonna do? Okay, so why don't you hop in and be one of the coaches? There's only 36 coaches in Chapter 1. Yeah? Who wants to? There's like $45 to be a coach. Grab a publishing title for $45. Claim one of the coaches. They're all invented already. I wrote this chapter out with a bunch of pregnant monkeys. Existing details is what we call that. And then we co-published those pregnant details by explaining how they happened. And here's all the coaches. There's the coach list. I'll put this in chat. And we'll get back to Impact Puzzles as presented by the podcast.
Wow, okay. Real financial stake.
Plus, they get credited as an executive producer for Season 1, assuming they hold the tokens when production wraps. They get genuine creative input opportunities.
Actual input?
Seems so. And even a physical office in the main soundstage building while the project is happening.
An office for a collector.
That's what the source says. But crucial.
How about an office for an office? There's a certain man who carries things in a sack and paints himself gold. How about an office for an office?
Actually, it also clarifies this position does not give them creative control. They are equal members of the collaboration, expected to contribute constructively within LMO's standard procedures.
Right, so they can't just hijack the show because they bought a lot of tokens.
Exactly. It prevents a single wealthy collector, a minister, from derailing the whole creative vision. They participate, they benefit, but they don't dominate.
And you mentioned specific creative contributions based on the token version.
Yeah, this part is fascinating for audience engagement. Holders of version 1 collectibles can actually create fictional characters within the press pass story world, as long as they aren't pro athletes or coaches. Those seem reserved. They can be like team staff, media people, service professionals, or just notable fans within the show's universe.
So fans can literally write their characters into the lore.
Seems like it, through some registration process, presumably. Holders of version 2 collectibles. They get to create or claim fictional professional basketball players or coaches within the story's fictional league, the Basketball Syndicate of America.
Okay, that's a specific high-value contribution to the core narrative.
Right. And version 3 collectibles, while still valuable for ownership and other benefits, are not eligible for creating characters or registering content clips this way.
Wow. That really is a fundamental shift. It's blurring the lines between creator, collaborator, and audience in a way you just don't see elsewhere. It's granular, community-driven, truly collaborative seems like the right word.
It definitely aims to be.
Okay, let's talk distribution. This is always a huge hurdle in the traditional media world, right? Often a major source of that leveraged violence where distributors hold so much power. How does this impact puzzle system, this SIP, handle getting the content out there?
Yeah, distribution is critical. LMO introduces something called no negotiation distribution gates. NNDGs.
No negotiation. That sounds bold.
It does. The idea is a distributor who holds one NNDG token gets the specific right to distribute the content, but only in the exact form and format that LMO produced it in. And they have to follow the NNDG's terms strictly.
Okay, so limited rights, defined terms.
Exactly. And here's the interesting part for reach.
Right.
The source suggests there could potentially be 16 different distributors simultaneously hosting the same distributed asset, each holding their own NNDG.
16. Wow. So not exclusive deals typically?
Not necessarily. For LMO, this is framed as a positive thing.
Yeah.
It's based on the idea that content needs an audience, and locking it into one exclusive deal can actually limit its reach and potential impact.
So maximizing exposure over exclusive control.
Seems to be the philosophy. Now, if a distributor does want exclusivity for a particular asset, they'd have to collect all 16 of those NNDGs, and of course, abide by all their terms.
Okay, so exclusivity is possible, just expensive.
Presumably. And LMO also keeps the right to distribute bits and pieces themselves for marketing, as long as they don't...
It's a non-secure point of market interest, but you could theoretically see somebody grabbing all 16 distribution gates. I think for Press Pass it'd be like 9 to 10 million right now for all 16 for season 1. And now season 1's popping, and now one of the other streamers wants one of those gates. Now they're going to pay the primary distributor 20 million for a gate, and they're like, well, we only paid 10 million for all 16. You see, so that's again non-secure. That's an outright gamble on the potential of the draw. But if the draw is huge, and let's say it's Disney Plus that has Press Pass season 1, all 16 gates, and now Peacock, because I like both. I'm sure they like me. I like people at both houses. So it'd be great if we're on Peacock, we're on Disney Plus, and then the show is on both places, and they each have a distribution gate. Perfect. But if one or the other buys all 16, and then the other one comes along and is like, yeah, okay, maybe we should have listened to Kimani back in 2021, wait back in 2022, wait back in 2023, wait back in 2024, wait back in 2025. Maybe we should have listened to him, and we should have shared this because this is huge. Everybody's talking about it. Then that's exactly this. It's more modular. It's more modularity for the market. Modularity is great for the market. It's absolutely wonderful. Especially when it's designed for sustainability and it's designed for not to just like eke out and die. The only time a distribution gate would just die in value is if, like, the creator of the show were a problematic person or something like that. You know what I mean? They got canceled. But even then, I don't know. Because people still, we're getting to a point as a society where if the artist is pretty far away from their art, we can probably still enjoy some of that art. But if they're all over it, like R. Kelly, then it's a little rough. And also, don't know anybody who's bumping Diddy before. Oh, let me shut up.
The terms of any NNDGs held by distributors.
Great.
It creates this flexible, market-based distribution web.
How does the money work? How are revenues shared between LMO and these distributors holding NNDGs? And what about protecting the actual content, the artistic integrity?
Good questions. If a distributor monetizes the content using some kind of gate, like a subscription paywall or pay-per-view thing,
Right.
like in a printout, productions retain 60% of the revenue generated from that specific asset, and the distributor keeps 40%.
60-40 split favoring the production house.
Yes. And LMO suggests using their own value per viewing minute model to track this accurately and transparently.
That value per viewing minute model is amazing, but we're not going to talk about that right now. The gated content is 60% distro, 40% producer. So if there's a gate on our stuff, we would just want 40% of the gate.
Also, importantly, if a distributor is using a paywall, they are required to grant access to people who hold LMO's own tokens for that project.
Reinforcing the value for the token holder.
Exactly. Now, content integrity.
If you co-publish,
That's
you get to watch
stressed
it.
is absolutely paramount. The content must be shown in the exact form, format, style, and sequence it was produced in. No re-editing, no unauthorized changes.
Okay. What about ads?
If advertising is part of the deal, ads can only be inserted at specific time codes provided by the production. No random ad breaks dropped in by the distributor that ruin the flow or artistic intent.
That's a big deal for creators.
Huge.
Yes.
Also, distributors are forbidden from burning their NNDG token. They can't just destroy it. They have to either sell it on the open NFT marketplace to another distributor.
I mean, if they do, then we have a backup. So we went 100 of them per project. So if you do that, we're going to release another one. We'll make more money, and you won't. Why would you do that? So for every project, we will have 84 distribution gates that we don't release as sort of a back insurance, kind of the Arsenal insurance program to make sure that people abide by what he's talking about. So it's a two-factor thing. The rule is there, don't burn it. But to enforce the don't burn, it's like, just sell it. Even if you're selling it to a YouTube streamer for a couple $1,000, sell it. You know what I mean? Like, when you're done distributing the content, sell the rights to distribute it to somebody else who can make more content and expand the reach and expand that audience. And we can all enjoy things. Goodness. Let's enjoy things.
Or offer it back to LMO. This keeps the distribution rights circulating and potentially valuable.
Right. Preserves the asset.
There's also a first rights clause. If a distributor holds an NNDG for one asset, like Season 1, they get first dibs on negotiating for NNDGs related to future assets from the same franchise, like Season 2.
That's actually a good point. And that is where more of the negotiation would come in. So if Season 1 is coming in, and these numbers that I have here, at advert, we have 65 distro, 35 producer, 50% distro, 50% producer on shared merchandising, which was extremely limited. We don't really, we're not going to do too much shared merchandising with distributors. But platform side merchandising without distributor, we do kick you to a revenue share pool for all 16 distributors. If, let's say, there's 16 distributors across from each gate, those 16 distributors would share this 5% revenue share pool equally from the merchandising. That's without the distributor involvement. So it's just a trickle, but it's actually significant. So, I think it's about $500,000 per distributor in a 16 distributor role. Yeah, not bad. Because a lot of shows are not doing $500,000 for merch. So that's yes. It's pro sports. Well, fictional pro sports. So I want the real pro sports involved. They're also in on revenue shares. Okay. Product placement, 40% distro, 60% producer. And again, like if you're in on these gates early, we haven't shot anything at Press Pass. We haven't finished the scripts for season 1. I don't have my writer's room money together to finish the scripts for season 1. So product placement is available. And if you are specifically a Korean car company that starts with the letter H, I love your cars. Also like Kia, but Hyundai does everything. Okay. Yeah, that kind of covers it. Frankly, there's not going to be too many other There's one other merchandise. There's one other revenue stream, which would be the collectibles that we sell out of the lore, out of the produce. But that's actually going to be something that I'm working out with the first distributor who picks up a gate. So if you want to be in on that, say, okay, your additions for the collectible scenes that are available out of the lore are $5 minimum. So where does the distributor come in on that $5? I don't want additional costs for the customer. So when I say $5 to the customer, I mean $5 to the customer. But if we have to pay 5 cents off that $5 to be on the distributor, 10 cents off that $5, 15 cents, where's Beast Buy? Let's put that in chat. Okay, it's right here. The idea of naming it this is just get this. Who cares? It's broken, but on OpenSea, but it works like it. Like, if you have your Rainbow wallet, it'll work everywhere else. It'll work in the Rainbow wallet. That's all that matters. $462,000. Okay, for the distribution rights, one of the 16 gates to Press Pass Season 1. And this exact contract and token ID kind of unlock the content escrow that provides the episode drop to whichever distributor is going to host this content. From there, we'll meet your drop requirements for whatever you need to have in the archive on your platform, and then it's just sort of a trust system. But if you have the gate, distribute the content. If you don't have the gate, pull the content off your archive. Can we look at how this actually looks? I don't know if it's available. Oh, it is available on Magic Eden. Perfect. Okay, so I did like a rotating thing. Even this is kind of degraded. Oh man! But when they figured out what I was doing, man, holy shit! Ooh, this is an all-timer. No matter what happens, this is an all-timer. Beautiful. Okay, 460 grand. I'm gonna change our lives over this way. Be ready for that. I am personally going to take a little vacation. I need to reset my brain. I'm a very angry person after having 4 years of this nonsense in the market. What I'm talking about with the non-fungible tokens with this, we're 53 minutes into the podcast of Bear Eats Ape.
Building relationships.
Potentially. And one final point on integrity. LMO explicitly states they won't offer NNDGs to adult or sexual entertainment platforms. So maintaining certain brand values and community standards.
Okay, that covers the distribution mechanics, but you mentioned earlier how this system empowers the audience in new ways beyond just watching or collecting. Tell us more about that.
Yeah, this is where the SIP model gets really creative with audience participation, especially using the Press Pass example. Get this. Token holders for Press Pass Season 1 are the only people legally allowed by LMO to make and distribute memes for the show.
Wait, really? Only token holders can make memes?
That's what the source says. It's this wild, innovative way to embrace fan culture, but bring it inside the system. Turn viewers into active, authorized promoters and creators.
How does that work?
The memes have to be minted or registered through LMO's smart contract interface. And token holders can even sell their memes as NFTs, as long as any video clips are under 7 seconds.
Monetizing memes officially.
Yeah.
Hold on. They can't sell them from their own wallet and from their own contract. They're selling them through our collectible interface, which presumably will feed into the distributors that we're working with. So a customer can be watching an episode on Hulu or Amazon Prime, and Press Pass is a sports mockumentary. 24 episode season 1. We're going to be looking at a basketball team in Sacramento that's threatening to leave, and the community response to keep them in the town. We're going to be exploring the sports media circuit surrounding this, and we're going to be exploring that sports media circuit surrounding this through the format of a sports mockumentary. So it's going to be a little bit like The Office, a little bit like a 30 for 30. The only thing I've seen that even gets the flavor of it right is Any Given Saturday Afternoon by Documentary Now. That's the only thing I've seen, and even that's pretty off, but because it's 10 years earlier than our window, and the stylings are very different. But all of the flashbacks, the reference points, the things in the lore that we refer to on our main show are going to be affiliated with a scene or a meme from the lore that's produced by one of the lore producers. So the lore producer buys a publishing title, they publish a character, they co-publish some lore by role-playing. It's a fun role-play game. We're going to get into that on another episode of Bear Eat Ape. And then they publish a meme or a scene into the archive for the show. The scene or the meme becomes a trading card, basically with 1,000 editions. The trading card is sold, $5 per edition, and the person who co-produced that result will get 50% of the result if they are the sole producer. If they have facilitated the result by using labor of others, the labor of others is included at 35%, and then the person who facilitated is at 15%. So an executive producer is actually plugging in 5,309 people into this relationship with the show, and they're getting 15% of the outcome, of the market outcome for providing that facility. So when we look, we're going to get into this on a later episode of Bear Eat Ape. Maybe I'm going to keep on pumping these out. This is fun. Let's see if I can. I don't need to switch screens. Yeah, there we go. Okay, this one is safe for streaming. Okay, so you see here, a purchase of 53,091 pieces of the show right now is $1 million. It's $1.1 million. Yes, so make me technically a millionaire for, I don't know, that we would want to get going by the end of the year. So Let Me Out Productions would be we'll be hard burning at least 200,000 of that. I'll put it that way, to get everything set up and get everything going. There's no risk involved in that purchase against us getting things set up and going, because the entire thing is behavioral, co-publishing behavior, and the infrastructure is already set up to produce results. So here, 33% of that market potential is $27 million. Who is going to break the market and put $1.1 million in a Press Pass Season 1 and join us on the challenge of creating a 33% return on your results to produce a $27 million revenue stream? I don't know what the tax on that would be, because I'm not really familiar with how that would be taxed. There's an argument that providing the facility to the lore producers, the people that are coming in and playing for free, essentially, that there's an argument, and a really good lawyer could make this a really good argument, that that's a form of art donation, and that this entire position couldn't be taxed. Oh, what do I know? I'm just a linguist. But anyway, that's not legal advice, but I'm saying the asset managers already understand this. And they also understand that when you write a deed through the purview of a native or indigenous nation, you have a little bit more freedom over what you can do and how you can transact the intellectual property. So regardless of however the curmudgeons want to address this. We have the ability to expand the behavior through colonization in probably over 100 different indigenous nations throughout the country of the United States. Okay, well, let's get back to this.
Though LMO suggests adding a charity component and also requiring that 35% of the listing price goes to any performers or artists whose likeness or work is featured in the meme. So sharing the value, even in fan creations, it's like seize the memes of production, as the source puts it, but ethically.
Seize
I
the
love that.
memes.
Seize the memes of production. What else do token holders get?
Well, all token holders get access to episodes via special digital premieres, maybe in the metaverse or community platforms.
Yeah.
Makes watching a shared event.
Cool.
Plus, they receive digital airdrops throughout the show's development and run. These could be things like per episode blooper reels, dialogue-only scripts, maybe digital trophies for hitting production milestones.
Little behind the scenes perks.
Exactly. It's all these details that show how the system is designed to encourage really active creative engagement from the community. It lets them feel good, ethically, about participating in the impact puzzle. It shifts consumption towards collaboration, shared ownership, and hopefully a much more invested and supportive fan base.
You know, listening to all this core idea of labor as property and distributing value based directly on contribution, it feels like it has really deep historical echoes, doesn't it? It reminds me of some old economic theories I vaguely remember learning about.
You're absolutely right to connect it to that broader history. If we zoom out, the impact puzzle system, this SIP framework, definitely resonates with and arguably builds upon ideas found in the labor theory of value, or LTV. And that theory has a long, really complex history in economic thought.
Like Adam Smith, didn't he talk about labor and value?
He did. Adam Smith, back in the day, believed that in what he called a primitive society, the amount of labor someone put into making something basically determined its exchange value. How much work it took was how much it was worth.
Okay.
And even in more advanced societies, with rent and profit complicating things, he still saw value often being measured by the amount of labor a good could command in the market. How much work could you buy with it?
So slightly different emphasis, not just the labor in it, but the labor it could buy.
Yeah, that's a key distinction often made about Smith's view. He famously wrote, labor measures the value not only of that part of price, which resolves itself into labor, but of that which resolves itself into rent, and of that which resolves itself into profit. It set a crucial foundation for thinking about labor's role in value.
And then Karl Marx took that in a different direction, right?
He did.
Yeah.
Marx really focused on the idea that the value of a product was directly proportional to the socially necessary labor time invested by the laborer or producer to make it.
Okay.
His framework got more complex. He talked about constant capital, things like tools, raw materials, which already contain value from past labor, and variable capital, which is basically the wages paid to the current laborers. And it's this variable capital, the living labor, that Marx argued could add new value depending on things like how long the work took, how intense it was, the productivity, the skill involved.
Right.
The LTV, especially in Marx's formulation, then splits the value added by labor into two parts. Necessary labor, which is the value equivalent to the worker's wages, enough for them to live and keep working, and surplus labor, which creates surplus value, the profit extracted by the owner of the capital.
The exploitation part, in his view.
In his view, yes. And looking at these historical theories really highlights the enduring question that impact puzzles seem designed to tackle directly. How do we accurately account for all the different forms of labor and value creation? And crucially, how do we ensure that the value added by that labor isn't unfairly captured just by those who own the capital or the platform?
Yeah, it puts the impact puzzle's proof of labor system in a much longer historical context. It feels like it's trying to operationalize some of these very old ideas about labor being the true source of value.
I think that's a fair reading.
And this underlying philosophy that labor is property, that the contribution of work should be the basis for shared economic value. It feels like it connects to more than just dry economic theory, doesn't it? The source material suggests it resonates with broader philosophical, even spiritual traditions.
That's absolutely right. This idea of a merit-based shared economy, where labor is the property of the contributor, isn't just some niche economic concept. It echoes through many different cultural and philosophical traditions. Even as the source points out, within the philosophies of most world religions, you often find principles emphasizing fairness, justice in exchange, and the dignity of labor.
Can you give some more concrete examples?
Sure. Think about the 19th century American individualist anarchists, people like Josiah Warren or Lysander Spooner. Their whole economic system was explicitly based on the labor theory of value.
Really? How did that work?
They had this core principle, cost the limit of price. They believed it was fundamentally unethical to charge more for something than the actual labor required to produce it. Any price above the true labor cost was seen as exploitative.
Wow. How did they imagine trade working then?
They proposed things like labor notes, basically, currency backed not by gold, but by promises of specific amounts of labor time. It was a direct attempt to create an economy where labor was the verifiable standard of value, a very early precursor, conceptually, to systems like proof of labor.
Fascinating. Any other examples?
Yeah, another one mentioned is mutualism. This is an economic theory often associated with the French philosopher Pierre-Joseph Proudhon.
Ah, property is theft.
Guy, that's the one.
Yeah.
Though his views were more nuanced than just that slogan. Mutualism advocates for a society where individuals or collectives own their means of production, tools, workshops, land that they actually use.
Okay.
And in this system, trade in a free market would represent exchanges of equivalent amounts of labor. The goal was to eliminate profit derived purely from ownership or lending without labor. Proudhon even suggested things like a mutual credit bank that would offer loans to producers at minimal interest, basically just enough to cover administrative costs to avoid exploitative lending practices.
So again, centering the value on the actual work done.
Exactly. The core belief in mutualism is that when you exchange goods or services, you should receive back something that embodies the amount of labor necessary to produce an article of exactly similar and equal utility.
Right.
So both individualist anarchism and mutualism really reflect this widespread philosophical desire to recognize labor as a form of inherent property, as the legitimate basis for fair exchange. And these principles, advocating for justice and fair distribution based on contribution, find strong parallels in the ethical teachings of many historical and religious traditions worldwide. It's about the inherent worth and dignity of contributing your effort to the community.
It really grounds the impact puzzle concept in something much deeper than just blockchain tech or new business models. It's tapping into some long-running human ideals about fairness and value.
I think that's a very important aspect of its potential appeal and resonance.
It's definitely clear that this impact puzzle framework, this SIP idea, has some serious intellectual weight behind it, drawing from economics, philosophy, maybe even theology. Where does the specific academic labor underpinning its development come from? Are there particular institutions involved?
Yes, the source material does point to specific academic foundations. The work underlying the impact puzzle methodology is noted as falling under the umbrellas of several universities. University of Aberdeen in Scotland,
Okay, interesting. Scotland.
the University of California,
Yeah.
Santa Cruz, and also
Yeah.
Sacramento State University, both in California.
So a mix of institutions, likely representing different disciplines that feed into this complex, multi-layered approach.
That seems like a reasonable inference, yeah. Cognitive linguistics, media production, economics, perhaps sociology or law. You can see how different academic perspectives would be needed to build something like this.
Absolutely. And then there's the Con-Nation connection we discussed earlier, which sounds just as foundational, if not more so.
Right. And it's crucial to reiterate that. Beyond the traditional academic institutions, there's that profound foundational element of Kimani Okearah's identity as a citizen of Con-Nation, and that explicit statement in the legal framework.
That Con-Nation's legal perspectives determine ownership.
First, foremost, and finally, yes. That statement powerfully intertwines rigorous academic thought with deep, living indigenous principles of ownership, community responsibility, and equitable practice. It's not just an add-on, it's presented as the ultimate legal and philosophical grounding for the entire methodology.
So it's this really unique blend, modern academic rigor meeting ancient wisdom and law, all aimed at solving very contemporary problems in the IP market.
That's certainly how it's framed. It provides a unique and robust underpinning for the whole impact puzzle system.
Wow. Okay, we have covered a lot of ground today. We really went deep into this whole impact puzzle universe. Let's try and recap the key takeaways.
Good idea. It was a dense dive. So we started with Kimani Okearah's behavioral theory, right? How meaning and value are created linguistically through shared interpretation of patterns.
Yeah, and how that honest flow gets disrupted by things like sanctimony, self-righteous prescriptivism, and esoteric fraud culture. Basically, leverage seeking behaviors that lead to inefficiency and emotional blackmail.
Exactly. Then we contrasted that with the problem in traditional IP, leveraged violence, where the investor usually ends up owning the property, treating creator and labor value as flat, while only the property gets compound value.
That whole destructive cycle, squeezing labor, then quality until the property dies, and the key insight being the need to separate the entity from the property.
Right, which led us to Impact Puzzles, the SIP, for co-publishing the economy as the proposed solution. The whole IP as a Lego kit metaphor.
Where each impact piece, each contribution, is tracked as a token on a decentralized public ledger, the blockchain acting as a public notary.
We looked at the specific use cases, some open source, some proprietary to Let Me Out productions, and we saw it in action with LMO itself.
Yeah, LMO's journey, rooted in creator equity, that unique community garden structure, and critically, its legal foundation grounded in Con Nation principles.
And how they define story worlds or franchises versus distributed assets, using NFTs to fractionalize ownership of those assets.
So that everyone involved, cast, crew, writers, staff, literally shares ownership through the tokens they earn or receive, taking franchise ownership off the table in negotiations.
Then we got into the nitty-gritty of the company ownership tokens for LMO itself, how they grant participation and brand ownership without traditional governance rights.
And that super detailed proof of labor system using half-day blocks, HDBs, to quantify every contribution.
Leading to precise departmental equity pools and individual token allocations, all paid out via a smart treasury. Meritocracy in action.
The Press Pass Season 1 example was wild, integrating collectors as lore producers, giving them voting power in the DAO, creative input, even the sole right to make memes.
Yeah, really blurring those lines. And we touched on the no negotiation distribution gates, and NGGs, for content distribution, prioritizing reach and integrity with clear revenue splits.
And finally, we connected it all back to the long history of the labor theory of Value Smith, Marx, and related philosophies like individualist anarchism and mutualism.
All grappling with this idea that labor is property, the source of value, deserving of fair reward. Principles echoed in many world traditions. And we noted the academic roots at places like Aberdeen, UC Santa Cruz, Sac State, alongside that vital Con Nation foundation.
Phew. Okay. So for you listening, the takeaway isn't just about blockchain or NFTs, right? It's about a potentially fundamental shift, a different way to define, share, and value creative work and collaboration.
It really offers a blueprint, or at least a very detailed proposal, for a more equitable economy, especially for anyone who contributes their time, their skills, their creativity to bringing ideas to life. It reimagines that whole IP publishing market from the ground up.
So here's the final thought to leave you with, building on that core principle. If everybody owns the property they develop, what does that really mean for the next great idea you have, the next project you pour your labor into?
How would you ensure that your labor, your unique impact, is truly recognized, valued, and allowed to compound over time within a system like this? What kind of value will you choose to create and share? And how will you ensure you claim your rightful equitable stake in it? Something to think about.
Okay. I'm gonna wrap it up. I've got this going on, so I'm gonna go lay down and get that processed. But thank you for listening, and please purchase a publishing title. Log into the Top Brass DAO. We'll go to Discord, verify your publishing title there, and then once you're verified on Discord, you're ready to produce results on our DAO, the Decentralized Autonomous Organization for publishing the results. And you can, I'm going to grab the link here and put it into chat. Invite contributors. Boom. Oh no, that's not the link. There we go. There's the link for D-Work. And I believe if I go here and go to the website, what happens? Oh, that just goes to the deed. Okay. No, it's on here. There we go. That's what we want. Alright, everybody. There's the Discord in the chat. And thank you for watching. Please share. Please clip. If you're going to clip and you want to honor my personal agency, buy a personal agency deed. I'm going to link that in here. You can clip and remix anyway and do commentary and share this as wide and far, but we're trying to protect ourselves against being replaced by AI. This is a great way to do it. So just support and buy a publishing title for my personal agency. So that way you're remixing my personal agency when you clip and do all that. Now you have a title to do it. There you go. Make sure you read this thoroughly because I only want to be used in certain contexts. You know? All right. This has been Let Me Out Productions in the Top Brass DAO. Thank you for watching.